This newborn baby, despite not even knowing how to walk yet, is already incredibly obsessed with martial arts. By 2, he could already cultivate energy to crush rocks. At 7, he created 2 energy spheres, all thanks to his past life as a talented martial arts novelist. He only remembers taking a direct hit from a truck that had lost control, trying to save his wife, before sinking into darkness. The moment he opened his eyes, he saw corpses scattered everywhere. Right next to him were some cold footsteps. He thought it was some kind of demon, but it turned out to be an old Taoist priest telling him he was the sole survivor of a massacre by the demon clan. He finally noticed the reflection in the priest's eyes. A newborn infant, the new body he had been reincarnated into. The old man just didn't care about his crying. The Taoist priest still held him tightly, leaping over mountains and crossing rivers, rushing like the wind toward their sect. It was a long journey, and the old man noticed the boy's face had gone pale, probably from the fear of heights. I immediately channeled a massive amount of ki into him, making the baby feel so full and sleepy his eyes were drooping. When he finally woke up, he realized he had been brought to an ancient building filled with elite cultivation experts. Before he could even look around, the old priest tossed him into the air. Luckily, a brother-in-arms caught him. This person would be the master training him to become a Taoist from now on. He heard that this profession meant he couldn't take a wife, so he struggled and protested with all his might, but all they heard were his wah-wah cries. Fed up with the noise, his unwilling master named him Gaon Trung. He had just started thinking about how lame his name sounded when the master stuffed porridge into his mouth. He absolutely hated plain porridge, but to survive, he had no choice but to swallow it. The master was actually very kind to him, even blowing on the porridge before feeding him, though plenty of spit probably ended up on the spoon too. But because he was still a newborn, he couldn't speak yet. This frustrated Gaon Trung, who kicked and clawed in every direction because crying just stressed his master out more than postpartum depression. So after 24 hours, Gaon Trung finally decided to zip it and let him go practice. A blue and white light appeared around the master's body, and Gaon Trung tried to imitate it. Ha inhaled and exhaled until he could finally say, "Ahchi." Just when the master was overjoyed and wanted him to say it again, no matter how hard Gaon Trung focused, he couldn't mimic it. Just like before, leaving the master feeling deeply saddened as he walked away. By the very next day, Gaon was able to use his energy to roll his body over. But because his head was too heavy, he couldn't lift it up to see the world. To keep from suffocating, Gaon tried to use his energy to roll back over, but before he could finish, his master opened the door and walked in. Seeing him like that, the man frantically picked him up and checked Gaon's head, realizing the boy wasn't a genius with innate talent. But thinking about how the child still possessed such potential, he couldn't help but smile happily, knowing he would surely become talented one day. 2 years later, Gaon had grown a bit, and his favorite daily hobby was playing with rocks. With just a little bit of force, he would crush them into 1,000 pieces. The master walked by and panicked, his face turning pale with shock. He flew over like a god to kick the rocks away. He nearly sent Gaon flying, but after seeing the rock in the kid's hand turn to dust, he felt relieved, though he still had to warn him not to eat dirt and sand. Looking at the man who was so worried about him, Gaon decided to keep the secret that he already knew how to use internal energy. By the age of 7, he could already practice martial arts, creating 2 spheres of energy in his palms. This was called moving energy. The master gave him a mission. Tomorrow, he had to go to the Taiping Temple to become a Taoist. But Gaon openly complained, just thinking about the image of himself holding a sword, lost in the world of martial arts, no different than an ant in a den of tigers. That's why the master sent him to the branch sect to experience a micro-society. Gaon had only just arrived at the Taiping Temple when a sister with a big heart came to welcome him. But as soon as he dragged himself over, John dragged him into a circle for a sparring match. Without a word, she spun the staff in her hand. She attacked, tearing a hole in his shirt. Just as John was about to finish the kid off, she stopped because she saw Gaon shaking like a leaf, which made her sigh in frustration. "You just have to fight back," she thought, frustrated that he looked like a wet dog in the rain, so she demonstrated for him once more. Gaon was completely focused on her staff until a strike whistled right past his body. He had grasped the truth. Seeing Gaon confidently wanting to try again, Gaon just smirked and lunged with her staff, but this time her staff was deflected. Gaon quickly moved, and instead of ducking, he crouched low and swung his staff. Just as John thought she was about to get beaten to a pulp, Gaon suddenly pulled back. He just followed his body's instincts and never actually intended to break anyone's head. And so, they fought day and night. A year passed, and Gaon could now easily dodge all of John's attacks. Just as she went for a finishing kick, Gaon stepped back in time. Faced with her kicks, he just curled his arms in front of his face to defend. Then he switched stances when Gaon went for a punch. It felt as though he were a multi-directional shield that was impossible to break, a defensive method Gaon had invented himself. He could cycle through various techniques seamlessly. He demonstrated it for John, starting from simple energy waves until Gaon suddenly spun like a top! John couldn't believe it. Before her was a 9-year-old kid, barely old enough to wipe his own nose, yet he understood energy techniques. They continued their match, but Gaon had already seen through all her attacks. So he just put his hands up to defend, but he never expected Gaon to react so fast, shifting the trajectory of her punch straight into his ribs. She didn't give Gaon a moment to think. John kicked him into the air and brought her foot down with a smash. An ordinary person would have had their skull cracked, but because it was Gaon, he managed to block it. Unfortunately, he was still knocked out of the circle. Seeing Gaon sighing dejectedly, she comforted him, saying he was a future prodigy and shouldn't be in such a rush. But Gaon just ran to the martial arts library to learn more, leaving John standing there in deep thought. She couldn't believe a kid had actually been able to block that unarmed technique. Was he actually a genius? Gaon searched through one secret manual after another but still couldn't find anything, so he angrily slammed the book shut. Then, exhausted, he collapsed onto the ground, remembering the past year. John had moved like a whirlwind, surrounding Gaon, and then tried to launch a surprise attack, but he had sensed it and defended, even though his techniques were always countered. Gaon had just dodged a palm strike, only to get hit by a palm from the other side. But John fell right into his trap and took a painful knee to the gut, rolling several times across the dirt. Just thinking back on it made Gaon feel dejected. He wondered if that was all the potential he had. Without realizing the candle had blown out, Gaon felt lazy and wanted to get some sleep, but the image of his training flashed in his mind, and his hands instinctively started forming a circle. A wave of smoke was pushed out from that circle, startling Gaon wide awake. This was the principle of Taiyi, achieved after his enlightenment in mastering the emptiness technique. Gaon went to find Gaon once again. He performed a few fan movements and then took a stance. Seeing this, John lunged in to attack, but her punch landed right on Gaon's blue circle. No matter how hard she tried to attack, every punch just slid right off. Elder Sabek, hiding in the bushes, saw it and knew for sure that this was a blessing for their sect. They smiled with satisfaction, surprised to find such a talent, while John struggled to break through this defensive circle. When punching failed, she switched to kicks, but with just one palm strike from Gaon, she was sent flying 8 meters away. But John's fighting spirit was tenacious. She shifted into a grappling style. Just standing there caused the ground to crack, then she transformed like a fierce tiger charging forward. John put all her strength into the attack, trying to shatter the shield, but her arm was eventually swallowed by the circle. Then, Gaon used his strength to toss her away once more. Not letting her recover, he flew in and delivered a kick straight to her face. After so many days of hardship, he had finally achieved a visible victory, but what surprised John even more was how formidable that technique was. It was actually Taiyi. Gaon's master brought him to meet Senior Jang Moon in, but as soon as they went inside, the senior had the master wait outside so he could speak with the boy privately. The reason he called for Gaon was to confirm his achievements, but first, Senior Jang Moon asked him about the principles of Taiyi. Gaon didn't hide anything and passionately explained while demonstrating so the man could understand easily. Hearing this, he felt as though he had been enlightened and understood a portion of it. He felt as if he were falling into a vast universe. This was the enlightenment he had been searching for years. By that evening, Master Jiang Moon had successfully mastered or broken through the technique. Suddenly, Elder Sa Bek came to check on the situation and saw Gaon snoring away. Elder Sa Bek extended his hand. He channeled his ancestral spiritual power into the boy, just like the first time they met. But he sealed that power away, to unlock on its own when the time was right. Then Elder Sabek suddenly collapsed to the floor. The future of the sect rests on your shoulders. While his eyes were dark and his body seemed to lose its life force, Master Jiang Moon knelt down beside him. Seeing some girls practicing swordplay in the courtyard, he didn't hesitate to leap from the roof to the ground. Gion was 16 now and itching to go out and explore the world. In his hand, Gion formed a ball of energy, which then shifted shape into a sword, before splitting into multiple sword key strikes, spinning at lightning speed. With one slash, he shattered the falling petals, impressing the younger ones, but suddenly he was called by Taoist Trongshung. As soon as Gaon arrived, the man got straight to the point. Today, you must head out into the world to wipe out those mountain bandits. And so before Gion could even ask a question or understand what was going on, he had to set off alone to slay evil. But whatever he did, he had to fill his stomach first. He dashed off the cliff into town, and getting a taste of the mortal world made Gion's face darken. Because up on the mountain, he only got plain porridge while training. Suddenly, a fat guy recognized him as someone from Mount Zhongnan. So, he asked for directions to the Tai An Inn. After being pointed the way by a sloppy map drawn on the dirt, Gion was able to go satisfy his empty stomach. As soon as he arrived, some sect members were already waiting. Gion's reputation had spread all the way here, so all three of them knew he was the prodigy. Now they had to head to Thak Tuyen to plan the annihilation of the bandit lair, so they all hopped on their horses. They galloped straight to the branch leader, Hu Du. Someone in the house rushed out in a panic, and upon learning that Gion was a disciple from the main mountain, they were extremely surprised. Looking at him with admiring eyes, the man realized something was up when he saw this group suddenly visiting. That evening, they updated each other on the situation. Yunsu revealed that the recent chaos wasn't caused by bandits, but that the true culprit behind it all was the demonic cult. Seeing the serious look on their faces, Gion naively asked a shocking question. Is the demonic cult really that powerful? Huang Wai enlightened him. The demonic cult has two people on the list of the 16 masters of the martial arts world, the demon lord Tron Unma and the blood king Sachiong. Legend has it, someone once wiped out 100,000 Mongol soldiers and survived to return, and that was the demon slayer king. So the situation is very tense, and they have to go to Ha-Oman to gather information. Only then will they have a chance to resolve this mess. Meanwhile, in the bamboo forest, three figures cloaked in shadows were whispering to each other. They wanted to retreat as they were aware of Gion's presence, sent by the Zhongnan sect. But one of them liked to show off and wanted to argue back and just take him out, because for sure, the others already knew of their existence. And the first one on the chopping block was none other than Gion. At that moment, the boy had just woken up startled from a nightmare and didn't forget to grumble about how his first mission was too difficult, running into lunatics right away. Before he could even complain, someone was banging on his door to wake him. They gathered to discuss strategies since they had lost the trail of the demonic cult. The priority was to recover the escorted goods in Xi'an, so everyone dispersed to prepare for the road tomorrow. Jian hadn't even had a chance to get a good night's sleep when Huang Wai grabbed him, wanting to grab a few beers to satisfy his craving. But they had barely downed a few cups, discussing life, when that guy got completely wasted and passed out on the table. Inside, they were busy drinking and didn't notice that the demonic cult had found them right at the door. After all that drinking, Gion had to carry the guy back, but on the way, he realized someone was tailing him and accidentally walked into a formation. Even though it was quite weak and couldn't trap Gion, it still blocked his vision. The person behind it was none other than the demonic cult. Seeing them rush in to attack, Gion tossed the drunk Huang Wai onto the ground and began moving his hands and feet to unleash his palm power. Not only was he able to block that guy's attack, but he also managed to push him back. One guy wasn't enough, so they both attacked at once, but Gion didn't panic or dodge. He just stood there calmly and stopped the sword with his bare hands. That guy's sharp blade. Then, he lightly crushed it into pieces and sent them both off to the afterlife with a single palm strike. Gion still had a conscience and ran over to check on Huang Yi, to see if the old man had sobered up yet. But suddenly, a throwing dart pierced the throat of the guy from before. The people behind this clearly wanted to silence them all for good, leaving no survivors, not even a chance at life. Not only did he bring the drunkard back, but he also hauled the two corpses of the anonymous attackers along. Qin Shi Hak was quite worried about Gion, since the world of martial arts is cutthroat. One slip up and you could lose your worthless life. I didn't forget to lecture Huang Yi about his reckless partying, warning that he'd end up in a pathetic state one day. Suddenly, Hong Chi-hok noticed poison on the corpse's fingers, the kind the demonic cult used for suicide. With solid evidence in hand, they could finally report this to the main sect. This was the chance to get Gion back to his home sect, and before you knew it, news had spread throughout the neighborhood by the next morning. Upon learning that the demonic cult had returned, Gion packed his bags, ready to head back. As he was sent off by his 3 drinking buddies, he let out a sigh. Since he hadn't done anything productive for months and didn't know where else to go, he decided to just wander around for a while. After trekking through forests and pushing through thickets, Gion was thrilled to reach the Murong family estate. He expected a warm bed and a good meal, but to his surprise, he got lost. But that didn't dampen his spirits. Gion was super excited to start his own wilderness survival adventure since he had rice and a pot. But the most important thing, the flint, was missing. He had forgotten to bring it. So, he tried to mimic what he'd seen on TV, rubbing a stick against a wooden board. But Gion isn't Mr. Beast. He rubbed until his shoulders gave out, and still, no fire. I didn't give up. He tried again, channeling his internal energy, which produced swirling purple currents of air. After a bit of tinkering, Gion managed to create spiral-shaped energy. He picked up a dry leaf, and when he tossed it at the energy, it burst into flames. So, Gion successfully filled his stomach. But that was 10 days ago. Now Gion looked like a total mess, his stomach growling wherever he went. His eyes lit up when he saw a rabbit in front of him. Immediately, he started dreaming of a delicious plate of meat and used his movement techniques to dash after it. But the rabbit wasn't a pushover. It dodged everything he threw at it, until he finally cornered it against a cliffside and caught it. And so, they both ended up in a heap. He thought he was about to have a feast, but looking into the rabbit's sparkling eyes, Gion relented and let it go. Because of that, he was able to hear the sound of cows lowing. He looked left and right, unsure of which way to go. Gion followed his gut, and lo and behold, he actually found a village. He ate his fill until his stomach was as bloated as a pregnant woman's. Seeing Gion's disheveled and dirty appearance, the landlady was terrified he'd dine and dash. A second ago, Gion had been so confident because he thought he was prepared with money. But when he searched his robes, he didn't have a single cent. His stash of money had fallen out when he tumbled off the cliff. Gion was crying on the inside, but hey, with this handsome face, there was no way he could just walk out on the bill. So, he confidently asked the landlady, "It seems like things in the bedroom haven't been going smoothly lately, have they?" The husband turned bright red and flexed his muscles, asking how that was even possible. "Who are you talking about, you punk?" But in the end, Gion managed to make a killing, writing the landlady a talisman more effective than eating fresh oysters. He relied on this to make a living, pocketing some decent cash, even though he had no idea if these sect talismans actually worked. Thanks to that, Gion's life turned around. He was shopping without looking at price tags. Elsewhere, the abbot gathered everyone to discuss the situation, worried that they were starting to make their move. This wasn't just a matter for the beggar sect or the demonic cult anymore. It involved the Solar Divine Palace. They were crazily practicing the fiery sun art, while the North Sea Ice Palace possessed the ultimate yin qi. The southern savage lands are ruled by 3 sects, but the point of them all gathering was to elect a leader. They nominated the head of the Namgung family, as there were only 4 candidates on the list. The world-renowned Sword King, the eccentric Gion of Mount Zhongnan, and Qi Kuai Yumanji, the guy sitting in the corner looking like a complete slob. It seemed there was nobody they could actually rely on. The Namgung guy had no choice but to take the position. So, the Martial Arts Alliance chose the Sword King as their leader. Meanwhile, Gion was out wandering again, but he hadn't taken more than 3 steps before his stomach started roaring loudly. Gion had to become a master chef again. Even the heavens respect a mealtime, but before he could take a bite, a desperate cry caught his attention. On the other side, a group of men was surrounding a young woman. But facing those scumbags who were eyeing her curves, she wasn't exactly a pushover, fighting back even though she was injured. They tried to gang up on her, using their numbers to bully her. Suddenly, Gion popped out of nowhere with his goofy face, using the moon-shattering finger technique to send the leaders flying backward. Seeing that move, the leader recognized him as a disciple of Mount Zhongnan, and was even more shocked when he saw the Supreme Fist being used. Gion didn't waste any time channeling his energy. The guy ordered his men to rush him, trying to overwhelm him, but with one massive strike, Gion sent them all flipping backward. The leader was forced to step in himself, launching a palm strike at him. Gion blocked it immediately, but since they were all so weak, he sent them flying off into the distance, all of them ready to meet their maker. He turned his attention back to the woman from before. She didn't look like she was in much trouble anymore. She was no amateur. She had taken down a few of them on her own. While talking to her as they hid, he suddenly used a stick to dig into the ground, and in the blink of an eye, Gion had finished burying the bodies. Once they were laid to rest, he turned back to see to the girl's injuries. Since he had some medical knowledge, Gion took her back to his shelter. On the way, he learned her name was Xiao. She looked pretty, but she was actually a 30-year-old woman. When she saw the place that Gion had boasted was incredibly luxurious and comfortable, only to find a simple campfire, she stiffened in disbelief. He cheekily called it a 1,000-star hotel. He offered her some warm porridge, but suddenly, Xiao collapsed and vomited blood. It turned out she was poisoned, which was why she hadn't been able to crush those thugs' heads with one hand earlier. Gion kindly offered to check her pulse to help her detox, but she refused. She channeled her own inner energy to force the poison out. Watching her, he realized this woman could save herself. Even though that kind of skill usually takes 12 years of cultivation to master, this made Gion suspicious. She wasn't just some simple person. She was originally a small demon spirit, sold to the Dam Huan sect at age 10, but the sect leader had been hit by a blow from a legendary monster and was instantly wiped off the face of the earth. By age 15, she had learned to absorb the yin and yang energy of others, eventually taking over the Dam Huan sect herself. By 30, she had already secured a spot among the 16 strongest in the martial arts world. Seeing the poison was so potent it withered the weeds nearby, Gion didn't believe it and decided to test a drop of her poisonous blood. He nonchalantly put it in his mouth. The poison was strong, but it didn't affect him at all. This confirmed that Xiao was no pushover, so Gion didn't bother beating around the bush and spoke his mind. Judging by her inner energy, she must have been training for at least 12 years. Fighting those guys earlier and forcing the poison out must have cost her over 30% of her internal power. She had refused his porridge earlier because she was still suspicious. She couldn't trust someone she had just met. She also didn't understand why he would want to help her. On the surface, Gion claimed he just wanted to do good deeds for the sake of his future descendants. But in reality, when he saw a bunch of shameless people bullying a girl, he simply couldn't look the other way. Xiao thought the guy must have water in his brain, so she decided to teach him a lesson. She drew her sword and pointed it straight at Gion's stomach, but for some reason, she was confident that he wouldn't harm her. This moved Xiao, who had never been able to trust anyone, to tears. The next morning, when she woke up, she saw that she had been covered with a blanket, while Gion was curled up nearby without anything to keep him warm. Xiao returned the blanket and left quietly. When Gion woke up, he was left completely bewildered. He did a good deed and didn't even get a thank you, people these days. Anyway, he quickly packed his bags and headed north. After trekking over hills and through streams, Gion finally arrived at Hoanghua. Seeing the Nam Chua village ahead, Gion excitedly rushed down the mountain to find a boat headed to Luoyang. That was a key location during the Three Kingdoms era. It was also home to the earliest temple in the Central Plains. In short, Gion was going to travel around Henan province to see the sights. The boat drifted along until it finally docked in Luoyang so he could stock up on supplies. Gion was extremely happy to be free to go wherever he pleased. The life of a wandering monk seemed pretty relaxing. He had just said that, but a second later he realized he had missed his boat and was left behind. Naturally, Gion wasn't about to just sit there and wait. He leaped straight from the shore onto the boat, much to everyone's amazement. Back in his room, he unfolded a map to check the route from Luoyang to the East Sea in Shandong province. But he had one concern. That area was close to the sea pirates. Gion just shrugged it off. He'd deal with it when he got there. He sat down to focus his energy. A purple aura radiated from his body, shaking the room so hard the ceiling support beam began to sway. While meditating, he suddenly heard a noise. Gion, unable to resist his curious nature, went out to see what was happening. A huge guy was there collecting passage taxes from everyone. They weren't exactly good citizens. They were mountain bandits. If you didn't pay, they'd smash things up. Once you paid, the whole gang would just leave. I guess they knew how to play the game. That night, Gion was counting his money to see how much he had left for his trip, when suddenly, a surge of killing intent hit him, making him shudder. Even though he couldn't see anything, he could still feel it. From far away, a fleet of ships was approaching, none other than the sea pirates. Gion immediately rushed to tell the captain to weigh anchor and leave quickly. Naturally, the captain didn't believe him. If there really were pirates, he thought he could just give them a few coins and be done with it. Seeing no other choice, Gion kicked the deck planks, sending wooden crates flying into the air, then used his sword to slice them all to pieces, no longer bothering to hide his identity. He stated plainly that he was a disciple of the Nam Trung sect to make his words carry more weight. But before the crowd could even be convinced, an arrow came flying toward them, followed by many more. Gion slashed through all of them with a single strike. Now the crew finally realized they were under attack by pirates and shouted for everyone to get the boat moving. But it was too late. They had already caught up. There was a boat in the distance, and the two men on it were the leaders of the pirates. As soon as they saw the bodies of their henchmen floating in the water, the scarred man decided to deal with it personally. Even though he was a division leader, he didn't care about his own safety because he thought he was superior, charging forward like a bloodthirsty beast. Meanwhile, Gion was struggling to take down one after another, but before he could even catch his breath, another group rushed to attack him. He only regretted that he hadn't bought a decent sword. Otherwise, he could have easily made mincemeat out of these guys. He smashed an empty barrel nearby and used his sword to send the shards flying straight into the crowd. The scarred man had also landed on his boat. The guy even recognized that Gion was from the Nam Trung sect based on the clothes he was wearing. Looking into those blood-red eyes, he felt as though he were being crushed by the guy's aura. He had felt this overwhelming sensation before from the seniors in his sect and his own master, but now that person with the murderous aura was standing right in front of him. The man lunged, wanting to take Gion's life with a single strike, but thankfully he managed to dodge. But the man was still stronger, so Gion had no choice but to rely on his sword veil, a technique that only those who have reached the realm of transformation can perform. The scarred guy wasn't about to give up either. His sword suddenly crackled with a murderous aura. It was like he flipped a switch, charging at Gion in a frenzied attack. His sword moved like it was splitting into multiple illusions. Gion managed to block the strikes, but he still couldn't find an opening. He couldn't help but think that if he had a gun, this game would be a walk in the park. After barely dodging another attack, Gion gathered his internal energy and unleashed his finishing move, the 5 Thunder Seal. Lightning struck the guy, though he managed to block it with his sword. Even so, he was blasted back toward the deep sea. Gion's face turned pale as a ghost. He couldn't believe he had to kill someone again. He tried to calm himself down. This wasn't murder. He was just protecting the vulnerable people hiding nearby. Just when he thought it was all over, that blue-haired guy suddenly appeared at the bow, on their ship. He had picked the exact moment when Gion was exhausted and nearly out of internal energy. Just as he said, Gion had no strength left to fight, but strangely, he couldn't sense any energy coming from the guy at all. So Gion just stood there, stunned, but in a split second, the blue-haired guy teleported right in front of him. That iron fan he was holding earlier had turned into flexible blades that pierced through Gion's body. Just like that, he was caught, wrapped up and bound. The boatmen hiding in the corner were terrified to see Gion being tortured. Unable to watch any longer, they rushed out to save their savior. The pirates swarmed the ship, slaughtering everyone in sight. Gion desperately wanted to save them, but there was nothing he could do. No matter how hard he reached out, he couldn't get his sword back. Seeing this, the blue-haired guy decided to finish Gion off right then and there, driving a blade straight toward his throat. Gion was knocked down into the cargo hold, and the blue-haired guy assumed he had met his end. But in this life, he couldn't have imagined that Gion would catch his blade with his bare hands. Using his innate true ki, he crushed the weapon into 100 pieces, then channeled a massive burst of lightning from the lower deck, striking the blue-haired guy directly. He collapsed, sprawled on the ground. His hands were scorched black, but he didn't show any fear, knowing Gion's internal energy was nearly spent and he was on the brink of death. In his daze, Gion heard the voice of his elder, Jang-mun. His vision blurred as he caught a glimpse of the pirates, and then everything faded into darkness. But Gion didn't reach the afterlife. Instead, he met old Sa-Bek from the past. Before passing on, the old man transferred all his internal energy to him. When Gion opened his eyes, He felt brimming with life. He gripped his sword, ready to wipe out their entire clan. At the 10,000 Mountains, someone reported to a strategist that the scarred guy and the blue-haired guy were toast, including their 36 soldiers. Fortunately, they hadn't yet discovered Gion's identity, but they were determined to find the person responsible, the one who caused all this mess. Meanwhile, in Chengdu, Hainan province, Gion appeared, looking even more ragged than a beggar, hearing rumors about his own exploits at the harbor. He couldn't show his face because he had technically died once. It was a good thing old Sabek's internal energy had saved his pathetic life, or he'd be pushing up daisies by now. At that moment, his power seal was broken, and his shattered internal core had been restored. Gion had reached the 12th stage of the Tai Yi technique. His top priority now was to find a really high-quality sword. Only then would he be able to protect his own skin. Suddenly, he bumped into a beggar who emanated a powerful aura. Without needing to be told, Gion instantly realized it was someone from the beggar sect. He decided to follow him, determined to keep track of the guy, simply because he wanted to know where the black shop was located. But suddenly, he got caught up in the rushing crowd and lost sight of the beggar sect member. Gion remembered a technique and pushed his Tai Yi power to its limit. This move allowed him to sense the life force of anyone within 30 miles. Cutting through layers of people, he finally sensed that golden glow again. He had found the beggar. The group was huddled together in an alley. They were just chatting away when Gion appeared and interrupted. Realizing he was from the Nam Trung sect, the long-haired man became wary. Gion didn't beat around the bush. I went straight to the point, asking if they were with the beggar sect. The long-haired man, Heol-gae, said this part of the city was their turf. Gion then mentioned his master. He said he was told that if he ever had a problem, he should look for a beggar to handle it. But as soon as he mentioned wanting to find the black shop to buy martial arts manuals, the man frowned. After all, belonging to a sect and going off to learn other secret arts would make people look down on you, calling you a glory seeker. But Gion didn't intend to learn other martial arts. Aside from the Nam Trung style, he just wanted to buy some hidden weapons and poisons, of course, to help protect his own life. Seeing a Taoist who wasn't overly reliant on his own martial arts, Heol-gae found him quite interesting. And so, following his instructions, Gion found his way to the black shop. The teller led him into a secret room in the basement, and after going down some stairs, opened another door. Inside, there were all kinds of weapons with diverse designs. Their quality was beyond question. They were so sharp they could slice a fly in midair, but the price matched the quality. So, the prices were sky high. They also bought and sold martial arts skills and information. Depending on the value of the information you traded, you could get a corresponding amount of money. He pointed his sword at Gion. His face didn't look murderous, but the reality was, if Gion lied about the information, his head would roll. According to rumors, the heat technique had been lost for a long time, while the ice key technique was the signature art of the Yin Ice sect, and the iron body technique was supposed to be a secret of the Shaolin Temple. But these had spread widely, along with the hidden weapon manufacturing manual, the 5 arts he had obtained by trading information with the black shop owner. Gion rolled up his sleeves and practiced the heat technique day and night. By the time the ship docked, he was so seasick he couldn't tell day from night. Not knowing how he would manage the overland journey to Liaoning province, Gion remembered Heol-gae saying he could hitch a ride with the Wanfeng escort agency. The noble families in Shandong province, including the Huangfu family and the Yu family of Shandong, had joined forces, making their escort agency incredibly powerful and influential compared to the others. As soon as Gion walked in, he saw the guard lazily lying there. But as soon as they heard he was a disciple of the Namgung clan, they welcomed him warmly, though he still couldn't decide whether or not to let him hitch a ride. So they invited Gion inside for some tea. They told a servant to report to the boss while Gion sat inside, being served hot tea and snacks with extreme hospitality. But it was 38 degrees outside. Who on earth would want to drink that stuff? So, Gion used the internal ice energy technique he had just mastered. A few snowflakes drifted right into his teacup, and just like that, he had a nice, chilled tea. Seeing the snacks laid out, Gion grabbed them and shoved them into his mouth, thinking he should eat up now before there's nothing left later. He was really stuffing his face. That's when he was caught by a man, none other than Trey J, the branch manager of the Wanfeng escort agency, who already knew about his background and the whole situation. Gion was the martial artist who wiped out the river pirates. Naturally, thanks to Haman sending a report to him, everything went super fast and became a hot topic, all because of his identity. That's why the boss at Black Shop had already paid him over 500 gold taels. But cutting to the chase, Gion mentioned he was currently on a begging pilgrimage and wanted to visit the Muyong family. He found out that, coincidentally, their escort team was departing in 10 days, so Gion could tag along for free, all thanks to his reputation as a legendary hero. If he wanted to pay the fare, then instead, Gion would have to teach the man's children martial arts. Meanwhile, Mr. Chegan was busy lecturing his disciple to study hard because a top-tier grandmaster was coming to teach them. Afterward, he told the kid to send a letter back to the main family. The fact that Gaon was such a genius, a top-tier master at such a young age, had Mr. Chegan on pins and needles. I was clearly a massive talent for the future, but it was baffling that the heir to the Namgung clan was just wandering around the streets, so he just kept waiting to see how things would turn out. The next day, Gion was taken to the training grounds to teach the students as promised, and after giving it some thought, he decided the empty fist style was the only one he could teach them. But to his surprise, there was a whole army waiting for him to teach them. Looking at the crowd staring at him with sparkling eyes, Gion, who was worried no one would show up, felt relieved. I became super confident and started the lesson. He handed each of them a dagger and told them to throw them straight at his face. If you want to play, I'll play along. A barrage of daggers flew his way, giving Gion a real scare. Luckily, he reacted in time, dancing around and knocking them all away, otherwise he'd have to hide his face in shame. While he was down there passing on his essence to the kids, up above, the uncle and niece from Mr. Chegan's house were whispering to each other. She thought Gion was just lucky and doubted he had really reached the transformation realm, as she was aiming to become the daughter-in-law of the Namgung clan. Driven by fame and power, this girl, Chegan Seong, daughter of the Jug family, was also going to the birthday party in 2 days. Meanwhile, Gion was diligently teaching the dullard in front of him. Whether he was showing them how to break things into 17 pieces or 5, the girl suddenly interrupted, pushing her way in while he was busy as a bee, just to introduce herself and say she was joining the trip. As planned, 2 days later, they set off for the Muyong estate. Watching them pack gifts onto the wagons while he himself was just showing up empty-handed, Gion let out a weary sigh. Where would he get money for a wedding gift? He was aiming for the Namgung clan, but little Seong kept peeking at him, and when caught red-handed, she blushed. Her mother asked about Gion's relationship with the Muyong family. When they were little, these two cute girls had stayed at their sect for a while, and now that they were grown up, they were rumored to be beautiful flowers. They were both highly skilled in martial arts, but a shocking piece of news that Gion never expected was that the girls were being set up for an arranged marriage, and his attitude changed immediately, because he didn't even know if the two girls wanted that or not. And that girl Cyan was suddenly jealous, despite having only met Gion twice. I guess that's just the main character's aura for you. When they stopped to rest and looked at the pile of gifts, I was sure that bandits wouldn't pass up such a juicy target. So, Gion went off by himself to scout the perimeter. Just as he was enjoying the peaceful sky and grass, he suddenly heard someone stepping on a branch. Just as he was about to draw his sword and kill the intruder, Cyan popped her head out, thank goodness, and she said she wanted to spar to learn something. After a while of her attacking non-stop, Gion had his sword held right to her throat. He was certain that if she kept fighting without any defense, she'd be meeting the King of Hell soon enough. Gion then instructed her on how to defend properly. Afterward, he demonstrated how to create an absolute defensive space, explaining that the most reliable defense is the ability to control the space around you. Cyan closed her eyes and tried to focus all her energy. She began to emit a blue light. Mr. Chegan, who had been lurking in the bushes, finally showed his face, then took his sword and tried to place it into the light that was surrounding her like a shield. After his job as her private tutor was done, Gion took on the extra responsibility of driving the carriage. After chatting about this and that with the guy next to him, they finally arrived. This was the heart of the Liuning province, the Muyong family estate. They all gasped in awe. As they were unloading the gifts from the Juge family, 2 men came out to greet them. The guy in front was Mo Young-sung, one of the top 10 young martial arts geniuses at the age of 25. With just an ordinary sword, he had mastered the formless sword secret technique of the Muyong family, but now he was serving as the chief gate guard. After the introductions, everyone was invited inside, and just as Gion stepped into the house, a girl with a bountiful soul rushed at him, calling him Uncle Master. But instead of a warm hug, she thrust her sword right at him. Jian quickly dodged it. Then, with a flick of his hand, he slapped her sword away. Then he gave her a little jab to the ribs. Turns out, this was one of the two little girls who had stayed at their sect back in the day, in Gian's eyes. Now she was all grown up and, quite developed. He was immediately caught staring, but he kept denying it, even though he was a transmigrator. All grown up, yet they still blush bright red whenever they get teased by their little sister. Of course, where there's a little sister, there's an older one. This delicate, proper young lady is Joni. These two are the keepers of their clan's secret martial arts and the future hope of the Murong family. So no sooner had he arrived than their father wanted to meet him. I is the flash-thought blood sword Moryung, a top-tier grandmaster and the head of their training hall. Gian had only just arrived and couldn't even get a meal or a decent shower in peace. I was dragged off right away. So, he had no choice but to show up and meet the host before mooching off their hospitality for a few days. Ryan kept gushing about how incredibly powerful Gian has become, which really made him feel pretty smug. But that was only natural. He'd already surpassed his own limits, so that was nothing. Ryan was filled with admiration, seeing as Gian had only just started his ascetic journey. Yet, he had already leveled up at a dizzying pace. Suddenly, a woman cut in, the lady of the house. Sel Moonhan appeared out of nowhere, scanning Gian from head to toe before telling her husband that he met the standards. The couple was being coy, trying to see if he had any special feelings for their two daughters. Gian was left completely confused, wondering what on earth those two troublemakers were up to. To his surprise, they both turned beet red and looked all shy, leaving him totally lost. What the hell is this? I thought it was something important. But unexpectedly, Moryung wanted to spar with him. Gian grumbled inwardly, "You're adding a filter to all this just for that?" Before the match started, Moryung introduced his style, the Imperial Form Non-Temporal Spirit Sword, while Gian would use his Heaven and Earth style, with the 36 sword technique and the 9 forms of the long pole staff. As soon as it began, their sword auras clashed. Gian didn't hesitate to jump in to get warmed up. I used the Tai Yi Divine technique just to liven things up, and threw in his sword veil for good measure, leaving the old man wide-eyed. He must have thought Gian learned techniques from other sects, the Zhongnan sect, but this was actually his own sect's secret. Gian's sword veil deflected Moryung's sword aura, and Gian's feet felt heavier and heavier. He crushed the ground to plant his stance, then unleashed his power to push the old man back. Gian actually had the advantage in internal energy, but he chose to fight with sword aura instead. Seeing that he didn't even weigh 100 grams in the boy's eyes, Moryung flew into a rage, determined to teach this cocky brat a lesson. One strike could pierce through a defensive barrier, but Gian was quick enough to plug the hole instantly. That was the true power of the Tai Yi Divine technique. Even facing that strength, Moryung stayed furious, unwilling to hand over his daughters. I didn't want to give them to him, while Gian remained clueless about what was going on. He remembered 2 years ago, when their 2 precious daughters came to ask if they could stay single forever. And the reason was someone everyone knew, Gian. Since he didn't want to marry them off, he tried to break through Gian's defense. But after hearing about the source of Gian's strength, which was discovering the deep secret meaning of the Zhongnan sect's teachings, he sheathed his sword and accepted whatever Gian wanted to do with his daughters. Because he still didn't know what was going on, Gian was just standing there like a complete goof. Once it was finally explained to him, Gian was so shocked he accidentally blew the door off its hinges. He never expected those 2 girls to ask him for a political marriage. It blew his mind. The real reason behind it was just that they wanted him to be their go-to guy, because they didn't want to marry a stranger. After finding out the truth, Gian just sighed and asked, "What about my own innocence in all this?" Joni must have been daydreaming about having a special connection with them because he treated them so well. But all this time, he had only seen them as juniors and taught them like any other children in the sect, which made the 2 girls realize they meant nothing to him. They were planning to use the sympathy card, since they would be married off to some random guy regardless. They figured marrying Gian would be the lesser of 2 evils. Political marriages were very common back then. It was all about the alliance between families. Nobody cared if they loved each other or hated each other. The parents of these 2 girls were also arranged, but they were lucky enough to develop feelings for each other and live together until now. Gian couldn't believe that in this era, people were forced to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the family, which made him furious. The aura around him crackled with small bolts of lightning, making the vase on the table wobble. Realizing he had almost hurt the two girls, Jian finally managed to calm his temper. This was the second time he had lost control because of his hot head. The first time was during his encounter with that green-haired guy when he saw the crew being mercilessly slaughtered. He advised his two juniors to live for themselves because everyone has the right to freedom, but they need to become stronger to do what they truly want. Before he could finish his sermon, Sung arrived to announce that the head of the Murong family wanted to meet him personally, leaving Gaon sweating bullets after delivering the news. Sung went to find Cyan to show his hospitality, but the girl's head was full of nothing but Gaon. Seeing her looking a bit troubled, he really wanted to share her burden since he had feelings for this beautiful girl. But naturally, she turned him down. In the middle of talking to her, Sung was suddenly called away for a mission, so they parted ways while Cyan still didn't know what her own feelings were. Finally, he could put the love drama aside and get to the point. The head of the Murong family was 72 years old and was on the list of the 16 strongest warriors in the martial world. But he acted like a simple, ordinary old man, whose only hobby was watching fish and laughing like a lunatic all day. Jian stood next to him, still not understanding what this old man found so interesting. The family head was just obsessed with those fish. The fact that Jian's body felt sore after the duel, as if he could sense the killing intent or pressure from others, could be explained by their chi. It's like a needle piercing directly into the opponent's body. That's their clan's secret technique, though Lady Sel Manhwa hasn't mastered it yet. Only the clan head's 3 grandchildren, Ione, Ryoi, and Sanji, show promise, so he wanted to know what Gion felt about this invisible pressure. In reality, the clan head had been testing him with his power this whole time, which is why Gion's body had been aching. It's the secret technique of the Murong clan. It's meant to pierce through the opponent's skin like a sharp blade, but it didn't bother him much because Gion already had his Taiyi defensive veil up. The old master had to look at him with new eyes. If it had been anyone else taking that hit, they would have been spraying blood like a fountain by now. Yet he stood there as if nothing happened. Gion didn't bother holding back anymore and showed the old man what he was made of. He just tensed up a little, and his defensive veil expanded, instantly shattering the invisible pressure. The old man couldn't believe it. Even a senior of his sect couldn't break that move. Shangmunin couldn't even break it. Yet Gion did it so casually. Taking this opportunity, he brought up the wedding of the 2 grandchildren, but the clan head is just an old man in his twilight years. Desperate to hold his great-grandchildren without caring about the feelings of the younger generation, Gian then proposed an idea to save the 2 kids. There were many sects present to celebrate the Murong clan head's birthday, even including some gangs that were mostly there for the free food, while Gian and the 2 kids were busy having fun. Only Gioni could hold her ground, but she still got blown away and beaten to a pulp, but for him, that wasn't enough. Gian wanted to train them in an instant, turning them both into top-tier experts to reach that realm. It requires sword ki filaments, so Gian demonstrated to the 2 girls what true internal energy is. Power emanated from his palms as he waved his hands to control the chi, to show them how to become stronger. Starting today, he would switch to teaching them internal strength. Seeing Gian's professional demeanor made people wonder. How much was he paid to work this hard? They tried to bribe him with pastries and good tea to get him to take a break, but they were disappointed when they saw Gian grab his sword and charge at them again. He was determined to turn these 2 into experts. Super top-tier experts, so they could be in control of their own lives. He remembered talking to the Murong clan head, wanting the 2 girls to live their lives freely. In this era, being forced to marry someone they didn't even know, they were backed into a corner and had to beg their kind uncle to stop this marriage from ruining their lives. That's not something a person should do. What he said shocked the clan head. He didn't expect Gian to have the guts to oppose him to protect his grandchildren. The old man tried to make excuses that it was family business and an outsider without blood relations like him shouldn't interfere. So Gian set a condition. If both of them could become super top-tier experts, then they wouldn't be married off like merchandise. The old man smiled, secretly agreeing to the request, but those 2 couldn't possibly reach that level on their own. So Gian would be the one to teach them, and the clan head trapped him in a bet. After 1 month, if he didn't train the 2 kids into top-tier experts, Gian would have to marry the 2 granddaughters. Of course, he wouldn't let himself be trapped that easily. He also demanded a proper reward for himself if he succeeded. Rioni and Ione were overjoyed. Upon learning they wouldn't have to get married, they started practicing diligently. The clan head kept tabs on every move of their training program, thinking that utilizing internal energy might be the key to reaching the top-tier level, something he himself could never grasp. So he figured Gion was very useful and wanted to push him into marrying his grandchildren to gain his power, but luckily their father still had a conscience. So he refused the idea. After which, he got an earful from the old man. A few days later they had improved, and internal energy started to appear on their hands, but when they tried to control it at will, just by opening their hands a little, it would backfire and vanish. This discipline looks easy but is actually very difficult, requiring breath control, body awareness, and sensing the flow of energy. Seeing his two clumsy students looking so dim-witted, Gion demonstrated again what true internal energy was, with ice-based energy appearing in one hand, and the opposing fire-based element in the other. Then he clapped them together. He was nursing plans to perform at a show to make some extra cash. Seeing their ungrateful expressions after being taught for free, Gion decided to start charging tuition. The clan head's birthday was tomorrow, and although the training had progressed a bit, it didn't mean they had reached the super top-tier expert level, so without a word, Gion wanted to pack up and run away. Before he could act, someone called his name from outside. Luckily, it was just Cyan coming to visit, so Gion's plan to sneak away in the middle of the night wasn't exposed yet. An unmarried woman coming to a man's room and then asking if she was bothering him. But Gion acted like a clueless novice, panicking. As soon as she walked in, she noticed a formation in the room. It was something he used to soundproof the place so he wouldn't make noise outside. When he was training in here, that's the protagonist for you, knowing everything but not daring to admit he was more talented than others. So without beating around the bush, Gion asked the main question, why she came looking for him in the middle of the night. It turned out she heard rumors that he was going to marry the two Murong girls, so she came to get to the bottom of it. As soon as he heard that, he knew it was that old fox. That was the one spreading rumors to snatch Gion up. Thinking it over and over, I really should just bail on this house. Before things got any worse, Cyan was overjoyed to hear from him that it was all just a baseless rumor, but she got a little too carried away before she could even finish her smile. Once she found out, Gion was only focused on his training. He didn't have time for love, marriage, or starting a family. Before he could even confess, he dumped a bucket of cold water on her, leaving poor Cyan to head back feeling completely crushed. The next morning, the music was blaring, and people were lining up to present their offerings. Gion was busy chanting for the two little ones before they headed to the arena. I was terrified he'd lose the match and be forced to marry those two girls. So Rayoni just assumed that the three of them getting married together wouldn't be such a big deal. Gion, being the only sensible one, thought that sounded like marrying his own sister. Another girl was left feeling completely rejected, though he had no idea what he'd done wrong. Whatever the mistake was, even the sensible Ione was left speechless, leaving Gion standing there with a massive question mark over his head. Watching everyone scramble to butter up the Mew family, those two guys were burning with envy. The short-haired one figured they weren't anything special, just lucky enough to be blessed by both the light god and the demon god. Since they themselves had been abandoned by the light god, they could only kiss the demon god's feet. They couldn't hide the hateful glares they shot at the Mu clan head, so they prepped a little performance before the main event. Out in the arena, the two sisters went up to perform. Seeing his two nieces on stage, Gion stood below, praying to every god he could think of. The music kicked in and they started clashing swords. Ione gracefully dodged an aerial strike from Rayoni, and both of them began channeling their energy into their blades. This was the spirit of the eternal flow dance. They kept perfectly in sync without missing a beat. By the end, they had successfully manifested Sword Ki. It was clear they'd reached the level of true masters. Their grandfather was over the moon, and Gion was slapping his thigh in excitement, relieved he wouldn't be forced into marriage after all. But before he could even celebrate with a good meal, the ground began to shake violently. When he looked up, he saw countless cannons firing at them. The scene turned into complete chaos. Mr. Mu stepped out and swung his sword, slicing a cannonball in half. At that moment, a massive army appeared outside the gate. They were busy lighting fireworks on the orders of the leader, the Blood Corpse demon, Kwashan. In the past, his Blood Corpse clan had been wiped out by the Mu family, which is why he was back for revenge. That short-haired guy from earlier turned out to be his henchman. He had prepared countless coffins filled with corpses and, after chanting through a megaphone to amplify his voice, they rang bells to wake the dead. The zombies started moving, heading straight for the gate. But that wasn't all. The short-haired guy pulled out a blood demon pill and fed it to one of the zombies. Instantly, it transformed into a golden heavenly blood zombie. Its entire body turned blood red, and it started growing even larger right there in the courtyard. The guests were being ushered to safety, but someone blocked their path. Since they were all legendary masters, they were too ashamed to run away like frightened rabbits. They wanted to stay and help, but Mr. Mu was too proud. He didn't want his guests to have to step in because of his family's mess. So, he sent all the powerful cultivators away to safety. But just as Gion took a few steps, he felt a spine-chilling aura. Sensing trouble, he turned back to help. Looking at the battlefield, Gion was worried sick about his two nieces. He closed his eyes to track their energy and finally managed to find them. They were both still in one piece, not a scratch on them. But things were still chaotic outside. He looked worried, but they reassured him that their family was strong, so he didn't need to be so anxious. Only then did Gion notice the air was thick with a dark, gloomy energy. He ordered the two girls, who were still clueless, to draw their swords immediately. Outside, several zombies had already broken in. Seeing one about to attack a maid, Gion rushed over and slashed at it, but it didn't even leave a mark. No matter how hard he hacked, it was like they had skin of iron and bones of steel. They even caught his sword. Gion was forced to use his ultimate move. 36 strikes later, he lopped the head right off the gruesome thing. He'd only taken down one when a whole horde started pouring in. Faced with so many, Gion thought about using the hidden weapons he'd bought earlier, but then he saw the door lying in splinters at his feet. Gion grabbed a piece of the debris, infused it with some chi, and turned it into a projectile that pinned a zombie to the spot. He was using whatever he could find, even his own flip-flop. Gion was about to launch that too, but the two sisters luckily stopped him just in time. He'd been working himself to the bone while they stood there doing nothing, claiming it was too gross. After a lecture from Gion, they finally drew their swords to take on the zombies. They went from being squeamish to neatly decapitating them in one stroke. I thought they'd settled things, but suddenly, a murderous aura made Gion shudder. He looked into the distance and saw a wave of red energy surging forward. Realizing trouble was brewing, he rushed over, but a group of zombies blocked his path. Meanwhile, the golden heavenly blood zombie had already wiped out most of their forces. Mr. Mu ordered those with weak internal energy to fall back, but one guy tried to show off and flew out there. I was taken out before he could even lay a finger on the monster. Seeing such a powerful master get finished off in a heartbeat made the others freeze in terror. Yet, in the middle of the crowd, the Mu family head stepped up to handle it. Everything falls on this old man, doesn't it? The people there didn't know the old master's true strength, so they tried to talk him out of it. You're old, drop the hero act, tuck your tail and run. But the old man couldn't stand being insulted like that. He showed them a glimpse of his aura. Seeing his father's determination, Mr. Mu signaled everyone to step back. The blood zombie charged. Thanks to its long legs, it was in front of the old master in 2 steps, but the old man was quick. He slid across the floor, popped up, and cleanly took off the monster's arm. However, what happened next left him stunned. The severed arm of the blood zombie suddenly emitted a surge of demonic energy, as if drawn by a magnet. It flew back to its original position in the blink of an eye. The limb that had been completely severed now showed no trace of injury, leaving everyone with their jaws on the floor. Things had reached a breaking point. The clan master had no choice but to unleash his ultimate killing move, the myriad observation sword. After slashing it once, he drove the blade straight into the creature's guts. Yet, unexpectedly, the creature's wounds began to combust. It was attempting to self-destruct to drag the clan master down with it, but it collapsed right before him. Talk about an old ginger being spicier. Mr. Modung watched his father drain his energy fighting the blood zombie, feeling incredibly anxious. Everyone present didn't even dare to breathe heavily. At this historic moment, Gion arrived just in time to witness the Modung clan master unleash his strike, truly a legend of the martial world. Elsewhere, all the damage and the fact that the clan master had intervened regarding the blood zombie was clearly reported to the man sitting there. That man was Ma Noicha, the one acting on behalf of the demonic cult leader. He laid out a plan to turn the world upside down, then burst into laughter like a lunatic who just broke out of an asylum. It left the attendant standing next to him with a giant question mark. What are you laughing at? The old man hadn't even finished explaining the plan, or perhaps he was just being dramatic. Their next step was to plant moles within the Modung clan to sow discord and tear them apart from the inside. Because their ultimate goal was to dismantle all the powerful clans, one by one, waiting for the day their true cult leader returned. After speaking, he started laughing again like a druggie. A month had passed since the shocking incident at the Modung house. Gion had become extremely proficient in both the heat cultivation and ice key techniques. He spent his days training over and over again. It made him incredibly bored. He recalled when little Cyan asked him to come along, but remembering Mr. Modung's promise of a reward, he had decided to stay and mooch off them. So, without hesitation, he politely brushed her off so he could stay and enjoy the perks. Cyan had no choice but to take off, remembering their troop's departure. Jian was now deeply regretting his choice to stay. Every day was agonizingly dull, but he wanted to use this idle time to master his poison craft and iron body techniques, though both required someone to assist him. I was just about to ask Ryoni and Ione for help when the two of them showed up at his door because, just like him, they had nothing to do and were bored to death. But Jian ended up lecturing them, saying they were now elite experts and the future of the Modung clan, so they shouldn't be wandering around like that, though he had no room to talk, considering he did nothing but eat and sleep all day. Getting back to the point, they came to announce that their clan would be joining the Martial Arts Alliance, with the Sword King Mocha as the leader. There were also many famous martial artists involved, but where there is righteousness, there is always a dark side. In this case, it was the Four Blood Alliance, led by the Master of the Blood Dragon. After the Demon Slayer, Gi Oc Trung grasped the situation of the world. Jian chased the two girls away. The next morning, he had to scramble to accept the gifts Mr. Modung gave him, all rare and precious items. But for a wandering Taoist like him, they were of no use. Finally, the old man realized this and pulled out a gold box containing 100 taels of gold, leaving Gaon wide-eyed at the pile of gold in his hands. I immediately envisioned a life of luxury, no longer having to hustle for food. But there's always a catch. The old man looked at him with a mysterious expression and asked for a favor. Thinking it was some big issue, it turned out he just wanted Gion to accompany him and his two daughters to the Martial Arts Alliance for safety. Having just survived that chaotic battle, Gion didn't want any more trouble. He wanted to just smile and refuse to make his life easier, but in this world, who actually does that? After all, for the past month, Gion had been living off their hospitality and had just received a pile of gold. He couldn't bring himself to refuse, so he had no choice but to agree. 10 days later, they set off. At the same time, many sects were heading south to participate in the Martial Arts Alliance. Gion swiped some green slime off a plant and tasted it. It had a very trendy flavor. This was something he had to do to train his poison craft. Seeing the two girls looking curious, Gion wasn't stingy, so he wanted to teach them. Even though buying this stuff was a bit pricey, he wouldn't be cheap with his juniors. Hearing that an elite expert who knew poison could rule the world, Ryoni snatched the vial of poison from his hand and tried to pour the whole thing down her throat. Even though Gion stood nearby, he couldn't stop her in time. Luckily, as the liquid poured out, Ione quickly used her sword to block it and flicked it away to stop the girl's impulsive behavior. That nearly got Gion killed by her father! Their group passed by some wildflowers that had withered instantly from the poison they'd dropped. As soon as they reached the village, Gion quickly said his goodbyes and went his own way. I wanted to find the branch of the Chungnam sect. Gion had a reputation for wandering and begging for alms, but in reality, he just freeloaded off people, though he still had to fulfill his duties. Today, he had to report on the situation. After parting ways, Gion followed the map to his sect's branch. Looking at the wealth gap between the two neighborhoods, I was certain he had to go to the left, as the Chungnam sect could never afford a location in such a lavish area. Just as he predicted, he arrived at the right place. All his senior brothers and sisters were there, and their presence made Gion very happy. Even senior sister John was there. But first, he had to go greet the elders in the conference room. Upon meeting senior brother Jonghan, Gion bowed respectfully. He had truly made the sect's name famous throughout the world. After scoring such a major victory, Gion immediately wanted to check on how his master was doing. But his master was a martial arts master of the highest caliber. No one could even touch a hair on his head, so there was nothing to worry about. The news of Gion training those two kids for the Murong family had already spread throughout the entire sect. Everyone knew about it, And thanks to that, their house had put in the effort to help Nam, even handing over 20% of the demonic artifacts, which was a resounding success. Gion then recounted the whole experience of his time with the Murong family. He filled the elders in on everything that had happened there. This was also why he had agreed to join the Murong family in the Murim Alliance, planning to leave tomorrow. But his senior uncle, Han, wanted him to stay for one more day, so he agreed. Stepping outside, he saw people everywhere. This was a huge event, though only Orthodox sects were participating. Not a single soul from the demonic cult could be found here. After wandering around for a while, Gion finally spotted a familiar figure. It was his senior sister, John. The moment they met, she greeted him with a lightning-fast strike. But Gion was used to it and dodged it with ease. Just as they were catching up, two guys suddenly appeared. It was Namgung Mu from the Heavenly Sword Pavilion. I was ranked quite high among the 10 great dragons, while Huangbo Gion was considered the future sect leader of his faction, famous in the martial arts world for his Thunderbolt God Fist technique. But just by looking at them, Gion quickly sized them up, sensing they weren't showing much of their true power. Yet not even 3 seconds later, he witnessed firsthand what real killing intent felt like. Realizing he was being a third wheel while they were trying to flirt with his sister, Gion quickly made himself scarce, but John wouldn't cooperate and insisted on coming with him. After the two guys were politely chased off, Gion finally let out a sigh, remarking that he'd nearly been squashed like a banana. They then went to reunite with Joni and Ione. Seeing that these two had improved quite a bit thanks to his charming junior brother's face, John grew even more suspicious of his true ability. She dragged Gion aside to have a private chat. As soon as they were out, she started beating him up, but Gion wasn't about to just stand there and take it. He fought back. The moment he landed, John immediately launched another attack. But a single sentence from him made her freeze. Surely during this time, John had been too idle, but he couldn't explain it to her right now. Since when did this rowdy kid get so strong? Hearing his reasoning, John couldn't help but laugh at Gion's stubbornness, so he decided to show her. A golden aura flared around Gion, the Tai-Ol wind force, which only swirled around him. It didn't interfere with the flow of his control void fist. While the two were testing their strength against each other, the elders of the Murim Alliance were holding a general meeting for the Youngmun military advisors to confirm that the person they captured was indeed from the evil Blood Lotus, in order to stop the demonic faction. They had to join forces to prevent those two from colluding. The head monk thought it was a brilliant plan, but he wasn't sure if they would even want to cooperate. But there was a high possibility, because the demonic cult was irreconcilable with them. Seeing this, the alliance leader agreed to put it to a vote. Anyone against it, raise your hand. But the silence meant that everyone agreed with this strategy of cooperation. Switching back to Gion's conversation with Gion, she seemed hesitant, fearing she wasn't strong enough, but suddenly he sensed someone intruding. Control Void Fist turned sharply to see a figure sneakily walking inside. It was the young master of the Namgung family. He had come because he had heard that Gion was leaving in a few days, so he came to challenge him to a duel. This was a clash between strong warriors, so Gion didn't hesitate and agreed on the spot. The young master of Namgung used his heavenly sword voidless art, while Gion went with his treasure, the 3/6 world-shattering sword, but when his aura surged powerfully, it forced the other man to be cautious. However, as the challenger, he couldn't back down and charged forward, attacking Gion relentlessly, forcing him to block with great difficulty. Perhaps Gion was tired from his previous bout with John, as he was being pushed back. Namgung Mo was determined to win and went for a finishing strike. Gion agilely contorted his body, flipping backward to dodge. But in truth, he had only been testing the guy's real strength all along. Now, Gion finally showed his real power. His relentless strikes carried immense weight, and every change in his timing and speed was calculated with precision and finality. Yet, the guy still stubbornly believed he had a chance because he was from the Namgung clan. To his shock, he was sent flying backward by Gion's blow. That moment was accidentally seen by a palace maid nearby. The image of the Namgung young master being beaten up while the young genius Gion stood there without a single hair out of place. And so, the next day, when John came to find him, she ran into a crowd of people gathered in the hallway. Gion's battle yesterday had been rumored everywhere. Everyone knew he had defeated the young genius of the Namgung clan. Some came out of curiosity, others to offer gifts and butter him up. Seeing this scene before her, John thought that the glory of the Yeongnam sect was finally returning. Walking inside, she saw Jian packing his things, preparing to leave. I had to try his best, because for their sect, the contribution Jian mentioned, the gold from the Murong family as payment for the two kids, would allow the Yeongnam sect to be a bit more prosperous. Once packed, Jian said his goodbyes and prepared to leave, but the moment he stepped out the door and saw the crowd gathered there, he nearly jumped out of his skin. Meanwhile, the Murim Alliance had sent a letter to the evil Blood Lotus. The content was essentially a proposal to cooperate to destroy the demonic cult. But before the message could travel far, a masked figure was lurking in the shadows, watching it all. Meanwhile, Gion was planning to take a boat to Shanxi province. But seeing the sky was too dark, he muttered a prayer for it not to rain, only for the heavens to respond with a torrential downpour right in his face. Because of the rain, the water level had risen too rapidly, so the boat couldn't leave. Jian thought for a moment and pulled out his map to take a look. If he followed the Taoist temples, he wouldn't get lost like last time, so he decided to just head out. Walking through the rain seemed better, but as soon as he took a step, a yellow circle radiated around him like a self-made umbrella, keeping the rain and wind at bay. Back at the small hut on the hill, that masked man from earlier had tracked him down. Wanting to place a hit, he tossed down 10,000 gold coins to have Scarface take out Gion. Though Gion used a shield, he only managed to dodge it slightly. The rain had soaked him to the bone, and the ground was a muddy mess. Moving was incredibly difficult, so he decided to follow the survival tips of Bear Grylls and decisively chop down a nearby tree. I then grabbed a bush of bamboo next to it. After using his strength to snap the log in two, Gion proudly looked at his handiwork. A makeshift shelter was complete. But he ended up wandering the forest for 10 whole days, and he was starting to get a bit ripe. Luckily, Gion spotted a village and rushed in like a madman to refuel. Seeing him eating like a starving beast, the people in the tavern crowded around to get a look. Once he'd filled his stomach, Gion rubbed his round belly and left, quickly asking a passerby where the pharmacy was. He headed there as directed. He handed the pharmacist a list of requests. But seeing a list full of nothing but deadly poisons made the owner's jaw drop, especially given the massive quantities. It was enough to kill over 300 people. The owner didn't want to sell, thinking Gion was planning to use the poison for assassinations, which left Gion speechless. He just grabbed a handful of the poison nearby and tossed it into his mouth to prove his point. The old man had never seen anyone so reckless in his entire life. He packed up the medicine for Gion, but suddenly, Gion clutched his stomach and collapsed, scaring the life out of the shopkeeper. In reality, he was just bloated from eating too much. That left the owner speechless. After a night of rest, Gion was full of energy and bolted off to continue his journey. As dusk fell, he resorted to eating plants and herbs, toughening it out to keep going. But suddenly, he heard the sounds of a fight. A young man in red was beating another guy to a pulp, leaving him limp, but in front of that guy stood an entire squad of soldiers closing in. Gion hid in the bushes to watch the drama, thinking that bunch must be from the Manhwa sect, while the group getting beaten were from the Wudong sect. Watching the two groups clash, he could only stand on the sidelines, not knowing whom to help. He tried to hold back, but his hand clenched tight, releasing a surge of aura. Not wanting to witness any more killing, Gion turned to leave. But his energy signature had been spotted by someone nearby. That person chased after him, intent on silencing him for good. He didn't come alone either. He brought a whole gang of men reeking of bloodlust, and without a word, he ordered his soldiers to finish Gion off. Gion just sighed. Originally, this was just an intersect dispute he didn't want to get involved in, but seeing this scene, where these people wanted to kill an innocent bystander just for passing by, they had successfully angered him. He didn't hold back, slashing at the leader and causing the man's sturdy sword to crack. All their weapons met the same fate. Only then did they realize how much trouble they were in and started trembling. Gion used his aura to demand to know which sect they belonged to. He told them if they didn't answer, he'd destroy their internal energy. Seeing them still trying to act tough, he unleashed a palm strike on one of them as a warning. Seeing he wasn't someone to mess with, the whole group finally admitted they were from the Dohua Gate. Just as Gion suspected, they were a branch of the Manhwa sect. While they were being crushed by his pressure, they suddenly became overjoyed upon hearing their leader's voice. He appeared immediately, only to see that Gion was just a young man. Yet he still hadn't dealt with the issue. The Dohwa Gate and the Long Sword Gate were two sects in the southern part of Shanxi province. The master of the Long Sword Gate was a direct disciple of the Wudang sect. Meanwhile, the Dohwa Gate was backed by the Manhwa sect, giving them control over this region. Because the Long Sword Gate had been growing stronger, they had infringed on the Dohwa Gate, leading to this conflict. It was a sect rivalry that had nothing to do with him, but he had to confront their master for wanting to slaughter innocent people. Seeing his disciples beaten to a pulp, the sect master was absolutely furious. Hai demanded to know why someone from the Chungnam sect was being so aggressive, but it wasn't him who started it. It was them. Gaon snapped, wanting to expose the Dohwa Gate to the world as nothing but trash that bullies the weak. Killing to cover their tracks! Upon hearing that, the sect master ordered his disciples to attack. Gaon didn't want to be a busybody, but seeing these hypocrites, he couldn't just stand by. If he ignored it, his food wouldn't even digest. He channeled his Tai Yi void-breaking palm, his body engulfed in a golden aura, and with one palm strike, he finished off 3 guys at once. His strikes looked effortless, but they shattered the guy's bones to pieces. Another idiot rushed in with a blade, only to be blocked by Gion's protective barrier. The whole group was sent flying back. Seeing his dominance, the sect master finally realized Gaon was the hottest talent currently making waves. I was the one who wiped out the demonic cult, and even the branch leaders of the cult had died by Gion's hand. The sect master still tried to use the Manhwa sect's name to intimidate him. I used it to justify his own wrongdoings. Whether it was a woman or a child who knew nothing, anyone who stumbled upon their battles was silenced. Gion wasn't to be trifled with either, firing back that if he kept using the Manhwa sect's reputation, he would report them to the Wulin Alliance. Hearing that, the guy still wanted to act tough. He pointed his sword at him. At first, Gion only intended to teach them a lesson and then quietly let it go. But it seemed this bastard had a death wish. So Gion was happy to oblige, left hand striking from above, right hand punching from below, teaching him a lesson he'd never forget. His hands kept attacking the guy's vital points before he kicked him flying. Seeing Gion's murderous aura, the sect master finally realized he'd messed with the wrong person and fell to his knees. He begged for mercy, though he only did it because he didn't want this to spread and become a laughingstock for the rest of the world. Seeing that, Gion stopped pursuing it and left. Seeing the moon high in the sky, he grumbled that it was a total waste of time. The next day, he finally reached Mount Chungnam. Gion had returned to his sect after his begging journey, and the elder, Zhang Moon In, personally stood out to welcome him. He welcomed him back. After exchanging greetings, Gion followed his master, having encountered many fun things on his journey, but also having witnessed things he shouldn't have. Seeing that you've grown up so much since you were a kid, your master wants to assign you a position in the sect. He's been managing the martial arts library all by himself, and that's been enough for him. So he doesn't need Gion's help anymore. Instead, he wants you to become the vice hall master of the martial arts training hall. It's the place where they train the sect's young sprouts. The responsibility seems a bit heavy, though. But if you eat the sect's rice, you've got to earn your keep. Even though you were ordered to take a break, you still threw yourself into chopping wood with intensity, then tied the logs up high. All it takes is applying force to one log so it hits the ones next to it, making them continuously slam right into Gion's body. This is his way of training the iron body technique. As a result, he ended up lying on the ground, beaten and battered. Back in his room, even though he was covered in bruises, Gion used a super outdated healing method, rolling hard-boiled eggs over them. He channeled his internal energy to push the bruises out. A powerful aura emanated from his body. He was sweating buckets, but in the end, the skin that had been covered in bruises became smooth and flawless. He never stopped training, sometimes switching to piercing attacks. Just by flicking a pebble, he could make pumpkins shatter to pieces. Seeing the little kids calling his name, Gion found them incredibly adorable. While showing them some tricks using his energy and internal heat, he looked at these energetic little squirts, the future of the sect. Surely, when they grow up, they'll be just as strong. Gion didn't rest for a second, moving from one thing to the next. Tonight, he's experimenting with invisible energy, controlling his mental focus to move it inside his body. After just a little while, Gion understood how it flows. His eyes lit up as he realized the secret behind brainwaves. They might just be the answer to this discipline. A normal person uses only 3 to 5%, but hitting 10% makes you a genius. So, if he can just increase his brain waves, he'll definitely be able to control the movement of his energy. But if energy can move around the brain waves, that could be considered the transformation realm. It's all just a theory for now, but Gion decided to take a risk and test it all out. A few days later, a disciple came looking for him in a panic and accidentally triggered Gion's DIY gym machine. He thought he was going to get crushed by those wooden logs. But to his surprise, you appeared just in time to block them all. You've successfully mastered the basics of the iron body technique. Seeing the younger disciple standing nearby, mouth wide open, eyes bulging, Gion teased him, saying that from the 3rd level up, you have to use lead hammers to hit your body, and at the 5th level, they use sharp iron swords to stab you, which scared the kid. He looked pale, but the reason he came to find Gion was because there was a sect summons. He was the manager of the martial arts library after Gion's master Jin ran it. I was then transferred to the training hall. Hearing that you had returned, he asked the sect leader to assign you here to teach the future sprouts of the sect. You've had experience teaching the 2 Murong nephews before, so it shouldn't be too hard, and you'll be training these kids along with Gongsun, the Taoist, and he will send one of Jochabei's 4 4th-generation disciples to assist. That person is Gongsun Jin, even though he's currently in the external martial arts hall. But he begged to be sent back here anyway, because when he was young, he was a nephew just like Ryoni and Ioni, but now those two are already supreme masters, while he's only an absolute master. Feeling left behind by his peers, the kid felt sad and cried. So Gion had no choice but to take on the task of training this guy to catch up with his friends. Meanwhile, at the evil Blood Lotus, this is the master of the Blood Dragon Gate, Satma Gi-ok. Just by looking at his blood-red eyes, one could tell. This guy has practiced the evil blood heavenly demon art to its absolute limit. They are planning to create 18 dragon zombies. The count will go up soon. They also received a cooperation offer from the Martial Alliance, but they originally wanted to take over both factions. So they agreed to the deal, but in reality, they're secretly preparing the dragon zombies. Then he burst into crazy laughter, convinced he could rule the world somewhere else. An old man is instructing a kid named Cho. The ominous stars are covering the sky. The kid understands the situation and promises that he will definitely wipe them all out. That is the duty and destiny of little troll Mu. Back to Gion, who is having an easy time. I gave Gongsun a very light task, carrying rocks, because this guy isn't allowed to take the expensive medicinal pills like those pampered Murong kids. So, making him play with rocks is to clear his meridians. Unlike the Murong sisters, this kid isn't a born genius, so he only has 35 units of internal energy right now. To become a supreme master, you have to rely on internal strength. For this guy, carrying rocks is meant to help him build internal strength physically. So, Gion continues to be lazy, making Gongsun carry rocks for a whole year. As for himself, he'll be brewing some supplements. So, come rain or shine, the kid keeps playing with his rocks, until he could carry a massive boulder on his shoulders. Gion now also has to worry about the other disciples of the sect, based on the comics he's seen. Having seen Central Plains martial arts in his previous life, he plans to apply that to teaching the little ones. So, after a whole month, Gion finished the martial arts manual he created himself. The very next day, he was put in charge of supporting the training of these sprouts. This is the first time someone other than their master has taught them, so they were all incredibly surprised. Gion glanced at them once and could already see their internal energy levels. Then he decided to split them into 4 groups to make training easier. Seeing Gion's reliable demeanor made everyone extremely excited. After many changing seasons, finally, Gongsun was able to generate sword energy, and so this little snot-nosed kid finally reached the level of a supreme master. He wouldn't listen to a word you said, just squirming around like a worm, crying out in joy, "Mom, Dad, I did it!" 15 years ago, the Gongsun family was on the decline, with very little wealth, but they wanted to rely on the Chungnam sect to revive their clan, because their master asked. You were tasked with looking after this kid a bit more, so later on, Gion made him work until he couldn't lift his head. But no matter how hard the training was, Gongsun never complained or gave up. He always wanted to keep going. Now that the kid has grown up, become an official disciple of the Chungnam sect, and can help his family on his own, the martial world has gained another master. The news that Gongsun has reached the level of a supreme master has reached the elders, all thanks to Gion's support. He has been training him in the Tai Chi vitality arts non-stop. There's also a homemade topical medicine that can boost internal energy. The elders at the Jiang clan are overjoyed. With the plan in hand, they want all their disciples to follow this method. They assumed the one leading Chongnam was none other than Gaon. But hearing from his master, it wasn't certain due to those complications. When he finally opened his eyes for the first time, he thought the position of sect leader wasn't just about strength. Gaon has ambition, but not for the top seat. He's just obsessed with money. His self-made martial arts manual has been integrated into the curriculum. Gaon studies other martial arts and adapts them to become Chongnam style, because only when you master more techniques can you grow strong and succeed. Suddenly, sect leader Jiang wants to bring Jian to the high-level summit, which shocks his master, because even the Taoist hasn't been invited before, even though he has reached the transformation realm. Although his master thinks he's just a kid and it's inappropriate, he remains firm, stating it's the sect leader's order. No arguing. Meanwhile, the demonic lord John Unma is trying to break the heavenly demon wall. It's incredibly sturdy and supposed to be indestructible, but the power he unleashes causes the wall to explode. The cliffs above also collapse. As a massive boulder is about to crush him, the demonic lord uses just one hand. Before he even touches it, the rock shatters into pieces after destroying the supposedly impenetrable cliff. A woman, the demonic goddess, Dai-Am, was waiting. He is intrigued to know what she saw in the future, but based on her vision, someone will ruin his grand plan. The demonic lord has to wait another 15 years before he can enter the central plains. His eyes turn blood red. Who else but him could rule the world? But as soon as she confirms that others are better suited, instead of getting angry, he bursts into laughter, accepting that he will rule the world alongside those very people. At this moment, the grand strategist is extremely anxious, wondering what the demonic cult is planning. He attends the meeting as usual, but the need to resolve disputes makes him pause. The Muyong family has been trying to expand their territory, but constant conflicts between Hebei and Shandong provinces require the Muyong family to step in. But even now at the meeting table, they are still fighting over land. Seeing this scene, the grand strategist realizes this is a trap to make the martial arts world tear itself apart and crumble. The alliance leader notices he looks unsettled, so he allows him to step away and rest. The grand strategist is always looking for ways to foil the demonic cult's plans. Back at the Chongnam sect, disciples have reached the supreme master level thanks to Gaon's training. Also, because of his research, the disciples can explore and create many new techniques, all of which were founded by him. Gaon is busy teaching his underlings. Who cares if the ancient lost techniques are gone? People need to think for themselves, adapt, and create new things to make their sect strong. His speech is moving and captivating. Suddenly, his master interrupts, snapping him out of his reverie. The resurgence of the Chongnam sect makes many jealous, and the Hwasan sect is constantly hindering their progress. But he pats Gaon on the shoulder, confident he can do it, and asks him to write a book on his research as a precaution for the future. While things are smooth here, the assassins are having a rough time. The scarred guy was ordered to assassinate Gaon, but he's always hanging around the Chongnam sect, so they haven't had a chance to strike. The sharp-faced guy is getting desperate because he already took the client's money. I can't ruin his reputation by failing. So, not wanting to delay any further, he plots to take Gaon's head. Gaon, meanwhile, is lazily training to reach the transformation realm but doesn't know how. He's considering taking a reckless risk. But the thought of his brain short-circuiting and his head exploding makes his heroic spirit waver. So he stops thinking about it and just journals his day. Since no one has broken through this realm yet, there's no need to rush. Suddenly, Gong-san rushes in, looking incredibly flustered. His face shows extreme panic as he announces that the Martial Heaven Classic has appeared. Hearing this shocking news leaves Gaon pale with surprise. The Heaven Classic was written by the most powerful master in the world. It was written 300 years ago. However, the old archive doesn't recognize it as the ultimate work due to their own stubbornness. And there's the demonic cult's conspiracy. The grand strategist has discussed this with the alliance leader. The Heaven Classic was found by a top sect in Jiangxi province when they stumbled upon a grave. That province is unstable because the Huang Tich sect is there. Carrying on the grave-robbing tradition, it's said they accidentally found it while digging up the grave of the martial heaven master, causing all the other sects to go blind with greed. They are flocking to Ta Huiet Luyan. This gives the alliance leader a massive headache because they will surely fight each other. They have to rely on the Muyong family's intervention. Resolving this isn't easy. For now, they can only hold back the weaker sects before the Martial Heaven Classic appears, leaving the rest to his discretion. Back at the Chungnam sect, Gion is standing in a circle, with 3 underlings holding objects outside. They strike him repeatedly, hitting his collarbone so hard it hurts and makes his face twist. His iron body technique isn't just for show. It's impenetrable on the inside, too. After the lesson, he sends the kids away. Gion's iron body is at level 6. If he combines it with Chungnam's theories, it will create a new technique. After returning to his room, he soaks in the recovery medicinal bath. To speed up the process, he doesn't forget to circulate his energy. Purple streaks of chi appear on his body and then fade away, and the wounds on his body disappear. After healing, Gion goes to fill his stomach and meets Gongsun, who is also acting tough, wanting him to train in the smoke body technique, but he wants to wait. I wants to wait until that technique is adapted into the Chungnam style before training. As for the Martial Heaven Classic, rumors say Ta Huyet Luyan is trying to excavate the Martial Heaven grave, but he can't do anything yet because there's a barrier. As they sit and chat about everything under the sun, the noodles arrive, making Jian's mouth water. But before he could even take a bite, someone ran up to inform him that Senior Kang Than was looking for him at the External Affairs Bureau. He called for him because of the matter regarding the Vothian Chankin. It's because the Martial Arts Alliance has started handling this case. So all the sects have to give them a hand. The Jian sect is being sent. It is also for the safety of the disciples coming along. His 2 friends are reliable people, so they won't be a burden. And so all the sects are heading out to provide support. They are heading to Jiangxi province with the Martial Arts Alliance. Of course, they are also greedy for the Chankin, so once they get their hands on it, they will share it among themselves. As for the Chungnam sect, they are led by Taoist Chungdo. Because of their imposing presence, the people are buzzing with rumors about the sect's comeback and that they are more formidable than ever. Upon arriving at the reinforcement site, he was greeted warmly. This man had also received support from Gion and had already been able to master the Tai at Luong Tuong technique. Senior Sister John was also very happy that Gion joined the reinforcement army. She knew that Chungdo and the others were coming, but she didn't know he would be there too. So she was extremely surprised. Suddenly, John's eyes widened when she saw the bruises on Gion's skin. She was afraid her junior was being bullied, but who would have thought he was just being reckless, training in the iron body technique? When she found out he was practicing techniques from other sects, she was even more surprised. But then she heard that even the elders and the sect leader had given their permission. Whatever Gion does just leaves John speechless. These people must all be crazy. Just then, senior brother Seun walked in to announce the departure time, early tomorrow morning. But he was teased by John, asking if he really came all this way just to deliver that piece of news. It made him blush bright red because his real purpose was just to see John's face. Gion naturally saw right through it and wanted to play matchmaker, but he was teased by John and brushed off. The next morning, the Chungnam disciples gathered in a powerful formation. Before setting off, Chungdo warned them to treasure their own pathetic lives. Those who couldn't handle the internal energy exertion could just leave the group and stop participating in the reinforcement. And so, they were ready to head toward the Vothian Chankin, while part of the Chungnam sect remained with the Martial Arts Alliance. Only 150 troops went. There was also another massive army from other sects moving in. The guy named Ma Noicha, leading the demonic cult, was gloating over the power struggles between the sects. He had planted spies to break up their formation. And just waiting for the conflict, the Ta Huyet Lian affair was only a matter of time. He laughed triumphantly like a madman who'd escaped from an asylum. The Diem Thuong sect had also started to depart. They weren't worried about whether they would get the Vothian Chan. Kin or not, they were only worried about how to divide it equally among the sects. That was unavoidable, but of course they were also ambitious enough to want to secure their own share. Rioni and Ioni also joined this reinforcement mission, but the 2 of them wouldn't leave Gion's side. They kept saying they wanted to repay him, but in reality, they just wanted to cling to him. But Gion didn't want to carry 2 extra weights at all. He ended up getting beaten black and blue by little Ioni. Seeing that the 2 were way too noisy, Chungdo yelled at them, making a scene and flirting while heading into an enemy den. In the end, they couldn't even reach the destination. So the battle starts from here. Meanwhile, the Huyat Long Gate is currently planning to retreat because this is definitely a trap by the demonic cult. If it's for this item, it will surely throw the world into chaos. It goes without saying that they have found the tomb of Vothian and the Vothian Chankin, but they are using it as bait for the fish to bite. If the Satmagyo were to give up on this pointless struggle now and devise another plan, it would certainly be more profitable. The Ta Huyat Lian and the Martial Arts Alliance had split up, ruling the north and the south, and they never expected that the demonic cult had given them a chance to take it all. And so, they laid out a plan just as we already know. The Supreme Martial Arts Manual, the Vothian Chankin, was found by the Huang Tich sect, and then the elite troops of the Ta Huyat Lian arrived to excavate it. They couldn't open the formation, so things dragged on. Yet now they are suddenly retreating, which left the grand strategist very confused. But very quickly, he understood the demonic cult's intention and wrote a letter to the Kim King. All the sects gathered in front of Vothian's tomb, but faced with the magical formation, everyone argued about how to open it. Only Gion was extremely calm, because he already knew a very simple way to break it. The original method created was a supreme formation, but if there are other formations around it, those auxiliary ones will absorb energy from the main one. So the solution was very simple. Gion said to just set some bombs and blow the damn thing to pieces, but because of the Martial Arts Alliance's reputation, he was vehemently opposed. Gion could only be speechless and walk away. He snuck up onto a cliff to sit and think about ways to make himself stronger. Practice what he preached, Gion immediately began training, not forgetting to set up a formation to hide it from others. But he was caught by John, who was worried that one day he would suffer a key deviation if he just practiced anywhere like that. But Gian had naturally already seen through it. She was definitely being chased by that group of young men, so she was hiding out here. Vothian's tomb still hadn't been excavated. Perhaps the help of the royal court was needed. After trying everything, they also decided to follow his way. Said they would bring cannons to blow it up. So much for saving face. What worried Gaon most now was that conflict would arise because of human greed. It had been a month since the Martial Arts Alliance excavated the tomb. Someone else's grave, and of course, it meant they had encroached on Ta Huyat Lian's territory. But they were just buying time to get as many cannons as possible, as much as they could with the support of the royal court. And so, after the shock of the explosion, the formation was broken. Everyone rushed forward and everyone scrambled to jump inside. But many sects still stood motionless at the top, watching. All Gian felt was that they were too shallow, and greed would be their downfall, because even if those people got the Vothian Chan kin in their hands, they still wouldn't be able to understand the deep meaning behind it, but no matter what. When Ta Huyat Lian and the demonic cult would also get involved, the Chungnam sect was still standing there waiting for orders. Suddenly, someone came riding on a horse to deliver an imperial decree to the Martial Arts Alliance. The group from other sects was inside the cave, but they walked forever and didn't seem to reach the destination. The path was split into two, and they didn't know what to do. Someone rushed over and ordered a retreat, because the evil Blood Lotus clan had brought their top experts to the scene. But the Hebei sect leader wouldn't have it. They had finally broken the formation. The opportunity was right in their hands. There's no way we're just handing this over to the evil Blood Lotus. I immediately ordered the remaining explosives to be set off right there. The Satmagyo leader led the evil Blood Lotus to seize the martial heaven scripture, but halfway there, he saw smoke rising from an explosion. As soon as Gion saw it, he knew those guys were in for a world of hurt. So they'd rather burn it down than let anyone else have it, huh? It's just a shame I can't stick around to watch the drama unfold. The Hebei sect leader was the one who personally lit the fuse, yet now he was trembling with bitter rage. Gion just stood on the sidelines watching the show, then quietly prepared to slip away. Better not get caught up in the mess. When the Satmagyo leader arrived, everything was already buried under piles of rubble. He swore he wouldn't let the Martial Arts Alliance off the hook, but he couldn't leave out those troublemakers from the Huangtuk clan either. Just like that, the Martial Arts Alliance was stuck in the middle. No matter which way they turned, it was a dead end. Their leader ordered everyone to draw their swords and fight to the bitter end. The sect leaders moved to protect their disciples, taking advantage of the chaotic, low-visibility situation. The slaughter began. Watching the fighting unfold, Gion kept his troops back. He didn't attack first, standing in a defensive formation. Gion felt a storm of emotions churning inside him. Wanting to minimize casualties as much as possible, he drew his sword, determined to restore order. Now, he had to target the instigators. The chaotic crowd before him included members of the Hwangtuk clan. Then there was the evil Blood Lotus, who jumped into the fray just because things were getting rowdy. And the third party, those minor sects that the evil Blood Lotus had bought off. People were dropping like flies. His gaze turned ice cold as he marched into the battle. Even when people tried to stop him, he didn't give them the time of day. A snot-nosed little brat suddenly appeared before him. A Hwangtuk general mocked him, but Gion just flashed a benevolent smile and launched himself into the air, a sphere of energy gathering in his hand. He slammed it straight down into the crowd. Gion's entire body was enveloped in golden energy. He sent shards of rock flying. Anyone hit by them was knocked unconscious instantly. It was just a non-lethal strike. He couldn't take lives, but Gion still had to flex his power a little. If you want to live, back off. If you want to meet your ancestors, go ahead and charge. The Hwangtuk men tried to stand, but they were all taken down in the blink of an eye. With Gion's overwhelming presence, they were completely neutralized. Seizing the momentum, the Muyong and Juge families were finally able to gain the upper hand. The evil Blood Lotus saw them coming and took off running. The Hebe sect leader didn't really know what was happening, but he shouted loudly that they should chase them, only to be stopped by the alliance. To avoid further casualties, the priority now was to collect the bodies of the fallen disciples. He looked around and saw corpses everywhere. Even though his Hebe sect had been massive, now only a handful remained. At this moment, the Gold King stepped up to block the evil Blood Lotus. So, they retreated. Even though they had managed to hold off the demonic cult, the losses were devastating. Furthermore, the evil Blood Lotus hadn't given up on digging. They were still searching for the martial heaven scripture. There would surely be another world-shaking battle soon. So the general strategist suggested using one person, the Moonshadow Divine Hand. But the alliance leader wasn't sure if he could actually retrieve the martial heaven scripture. If they had reinforcements from the alliance, the chances of success would be much higher. They also wanted to ask the imperial court for help. So the alliance leader decided to go personally to speak with Feng Tiandonghua. He then proposed a plan: hold a martial arts assembly to attract more people. Then, they would just wait for the spies to infiltrate so they could root them out once and for all. Gion, meanwhile, was exhausted from selling his labor, working himself to the bone only to end up breaking the formation for the evil Blood Lotus for free. Seeing his men starting to drop one by one, he could only let out a heavy sigh. Once he returned, he would definitely propose wiping out the evil Blood Lotus for starting this whole war. If they didn't deal with it, it would be like a forest fire spreading further every day. But as soon as he returned to Jongnan, Gaon asked to go out and wander the world, just to get more training in. Once he got the green light, he left immediately. The first place Gion had been dreaming of day and night was the black shop, but he didn't have a single cent to his name, so he had to find some odd jobs to put food on the table first. Gion hadn't been free for even 3 seconds before a fan appeared behind him. A fanboy stood there, grinning ear to ear. After the battle, the evil Blood Lotus had finally gotten their hands on the martial heaven scripture, but it was snatched away by the Moonshadow Divine Hand through brute force. Then, it was lost to the winds of the pugilistic world. The Hwangtuk sect leader was the first to study it, but he ended up suffering from key deviation and died a miserable death. Naturally, the Martial Arts Alliance couldn't escape the fallout either. Rumors spread that they had released the criminal Divine Hand for the sake of fame. Gion just found it ridiculous. They were all just hypocrites. He walked into the martial library to buy some secret manuals, but his jaw dropped at how expensive they were. Gion wanted to find the Upper Dantian and Blood Demon Brain manuals, but after hearing the price, he said goodbye. Suddenly, the old man called out to Gion. He handed him a banknote. This was the payment for the information Gion had provided earlier, because someone had recently come looking for information on people who practiced the Upper Dantian technique. He'd stumbled into money without even trying. Gion took off like a shot, combining his light footwork with the Jongnan sect's shadowless step. But his journey was cut short by a foul smell wafting from a nearby village. It was a slum. Everywhere he looked, people were lying around, barely conscious. Seeing a little girl struggling to take even a single step, Gion knew he couldn't help everyone, so he turned to leave. But before he could take a step, the girl collapsed hard. This child's name was Gawa. She used to be the daughter of a wealthy family, beloved by her father. But when she opened her eyes, she saw a strange-looking uncle using ki to clear away the dust. Gion just raised an arm, and all the filth in the room was instantly swept outside. He also used his power to heal the child's wounds. Gion had asked around to find her home and brought her back. Moreover, he acted like a living bodhisattva. I even treated Gawa's mother, but her condition just wouldn't improve. To help her mother get better, the little girl went out to beg, looking absolutely pitiful. Gion walked away, but he hadn't even taken 3 steps from the house before his heart softened, and he turned back. He asked the girl for a favor, then added medicinal herbs into a pot. This was the medicinal soup he had made for Gawa's mother, not just for her, though. Gion wanted to distribute this medicine to the people in the slums, too. So, he gathered everyone together. Hai introduced himself as a Taoist from the Chungnam sect, but they didn't believe him. An old man showed clear contempt and turned to leave. Seeing that they didn't respect him, Gion frowned and let out a shout so loud it felt like it would scare the soul right out of their bodies. Naturally, the crowd grew wary. His face looked suspicious, and they were afraid his free treatment was just a scam. Suddenly, someone shoved a drunkard forward to test him, but the man hadn't even taken 4 steps before he collapsed to the ground. Gion quickly lunged forward to check the man's pulse. Suddenly, everyone gasped in astonishment and knelt to the ground, worshipping him as if a god had descended, because in the blink of an eye, Gion's entire body was glowing with golden energy. He had managed to get the drunkard back on his feet, standing perfectly strong. Meanwhile, the assassins had received word that he was in the slums, but they hadn't made a move yet. They held back because there were spies from the Hwasan and Chungnam sects there. They began to plan carefully, while Gion was busy detonating his upper Dantian energy using his abdominal muscles. After some effort, he managed to manifest the Chensheng Qigong in his hands. Gawa, who had been hiding nearby, saw everything and naively asked if practicing that way would make her strong. She seemed genuinely fascinated by the discipline. Harboring a dream of being able to protect her mother, Gawa became the first disciple to learn the self-taught Chensheng Qigong from Gion. And so, he began teaching the healing arts to everyone. He shared it with all the neighbors, and thanks to that, the slums regained their vitality. His name spread across Shaanxi province with a new title, the Benevolent Taoist Hero. Naturally, news of his new martial arts method for healing reached the Hwasan sect. They realized it contained techniques that didn't just come from his own sect. It also incorporated martial arts from many other schools. Most importantly, the reputation of the Chungnam sect was growing further and further. Threatened by his rising fame, they couldn't just sit by and watch any longer. Within the last month, while Gion was diligently treating the sick, little Gawa suddenly asked, "What would happen if you controlled cells to regenerate one?" It startled him, making him jump. Gion had been researching that very topic lately. Gawa must have overheard him muttering about it, but even he didn't know the answer yet. When had he even said that out loud? The girl was truly brilliant. Come to think of it, Gawa had previously tested herself using a method he had never even taught her. She had just watched Gion do it and copied it perfectly. The child could even answer every question he posed. Her memory was far superior to his, so it was clear this was a natural gift. Not many martial artists use styles based on their brains, because few can think clearly while fighting. It requires both a flexible body and a rational mind. Seeing such talent before him, Gion didn't hesitate to ask if she was interested in the Tao. Would she follow him? And so, Gawa decided to walk the path of cultivation with him. Gion arranged a job for her mother at an inn, which made her incredibly happy. She hugged her daughter tightly to say goodbye one last time. Gion was quite worried about such a young child having to leave her mother, but Gawa was incredibly mature. She told herself she would endure whatever she had to. The two set off for the Taoist temple. As soon as they arrived, they were greeted by his fellow disciples. It was his junior, who was also Gawa's 4th brother. Gion's immediate plan was to train her mind. So the two continued their journey on an ox cart, with Gawa practicing non-stop. They were heading toward Hubei province because training in just one place would surely turn her into a fool. Gion wanted to take her to the Kongzhou flying arena. I wanted to show her how things really were. A place where people could freely use weapons to kill each other, where if you die, that's it. It had become a gambling den for corrupt officials. Even so, Gion brought a child inside, though he was very considerate in letting her know that behind those doors lay a brutal world. Seeing Gawa's scared expression as she watched someone dragging their wounded body along, Gion knew it was too early for such a small child. But even with natural talent, if she didn't train, she wouldn't survive in the martial world later. Gawa wasn't a pushover, though. She was incredibly tough. She insisted that she could take it. Inside, two fighters were squaring off. The man in blue had a scar on his face, but that wasn't the point. The important thing was the blood-red look in his eyes. He had a murderous intent, as if he wanted to claim a life. While the crowd cheered, Gaon observed Gawa's every reaction. She was incredibly brave. She wasn't scared by what was happening right in front of her, perhaps because she had lived such a hard life since she was little. Gaon told her to watch the match closely, as this was the cruelty of society in miniature. The man in red couldn't hold back anymore. He used a meteor-flying tiger spear to strike repeatedly, gaining the upper hand. Gaon began his lesson. Using a spear was a very wise choice, because it wasn't just for thrusting. It could also be swung. As the man tried to strike downward, he drove the handle of the spear directly into the face of the man in blue. But even a spear, with all its power, has its weaknesses. Every weapon is like that. Gawa showed no expression at all as she watched the body of the man in blue being dragged away. The two decided to stay there for 3 months. Every day, he showed her about 10 matches, and Gawa absorbed the martial arts and weapon techniques at a dizzying speed. After getting her free lessons, they packed up and continued their journey. Gawa had one dream, to reach the capital, the place where the emperor lived. Since it was later called Beijing, the two of them just kept moving forward, decided on heading there. But Gawa wasn't used to traveling by foot, so they were extremely slow. Meanwhile, Gaon had already sold their carriage to pay for those martial arts matches. So, when dusk started to fall, he checked her feet. In the blink of an eye, the blisters inside vanished, no matter how much they must have been aching. Gawa didn't let out a single complaint the entire way. Truly admirable. That night, they camped in the forest. They still had about 3 days to go. Watching how tired she was, yet she didn't dare to whine, Gion suddenly paused. If Gawa couldn't handle it or no longer enjoyed this path of cultivation, she could quit at any time, because there were still plenty of ways to make her life better and happier. They say even a starving man has to eat, yet Gaon hadn't had a single peaceful meal since this whole thing started. Sensing killing intent, he grabbed his sword and stepped out. "Show your faces, you cowards!" Gaon swung his sword to draw a circle around Gawa. Then, tracing from his sword tip behind her to close the loop, a streak of red light suddenly flared up. Gaon warned her not to step out of the circle. Immediately, shurikens came flying, but luckily, the circle he drew formed a protective barrier, and Gaon was quick enough to swat them all away. He closed his eyes to focus and probe how many people were trying to ambush them. Spotting the purple auras, Gaon realized instantly that these were assassins. It had been a while since his life had been this chaotic. In a flash, those guys appeared right in front of Gaon, attacking frantically, but of course he blocked every strike with just one sword. He barely stepped back before another one lunged at him. Gaon's reflexes were still a step faster, dodging a direct slash from an assassin. Finding this bunch more annoying than leeches, he leaped up, gaining momentum to strike straight down. He shattered the ground into pieces, then used the debris to launch a lethal counterattack, hitting them directly and sending them flying. Sitting inside the protective circle watching the intense action, Gawa broke into a cold sweat, while Gaon outside just sighed at how reckless these guys were, acting like their lives meant nothing. To him, these assassins were nothing more than a school of fish jumping right into a shark's mouth. Seeing Gaon being so arrogant, not taking them seriously at all, one guy got furious and threw a chain at him, but he dodged it with ease. Predicting the move, he ducked as it swung back. Before he could even catch his breath, a barrage of shurikens came flying. Gaon quickly used his sword to form a shield. For a moment, their overwhelming numbers got to him, and one of his arms was slashed. Faced with their intensity, he started worrying about how long his barrier could actually hold up, so he picked up the pace and ran to lure them away from there. Gaon stepped on a branch and soared into the air, landing in a clearing far from where they were before, only to be met by countless spiked bombs being hurled his way. They all detonated at once with massive force. Just then, a figure appeared from the trees holding a sword. Gawa, sitting inside, thought it was her master. But when he stepped into the moonlight and revealed his face, it turned out to be one of the assassins. The protective barrier was already on the verge of fading, "Don't you disappear!" the guy yelled, raising his sword to finish off Gion's companion, but out of nowhere, a shadow moved like lightning and skewered him from behind. Gion sent that assassin straight to the afterlife. At that moment, Gawa was terrified, her face tear-streaked as she looked up. But upon seeing him standing there, with a bright smile on his face, she quickly rushed over and hugged Gion tightly, sobbing. When she heard the explosion earlier, she was scared to death, thinking he had been killed. But as it happened, when the bombs went off, he was quick enough to use his sword to block it. Emerging from the thick smoke, the assassins thought they had managed to finish off Gion, looking to take an arm back as proof, but they didn't expect him to be standing there as steady as a rock, not even losing a single hair. Gion had turned the tables on a losing battle. It was thanks to his sword aura, which had enveloped his body to protect his life. But those guys didn't realize death was staring them in the face and kept eagerly rushing in for the kill. Gion quickly parried all their sword strikes, but as they say, 3 against 1. Even a pro can get caught off guard. He was starting to run low on internal energy, so he couldn't drag this out any longer. Wanting to win quickly, he used his ultimate technique, the 36 heaven-shattering swords. In an instant, he teleported right in front of them, sending them off to report to the King of Hell with just one strike. The situation was truly tense. If Gion hadn't trained in the iron body technique, he would surely have been beaten to a pulp. Having survived the gates of death, Gawa fell into a deep sleep. When she opened her eyes, she saw she was lying in a bed. Just as she stepped out to find Gion, she was struck by the sight of the fiery red sun. The two were on a boat heading toward a larger village, a place with many people, so the assassins wouldn't dare strike. That was where the master and his disciple were headed. As the boat docked, Gawa was overwhelmed by the glamour of the place. When she realized it, she saw Gion far in the distance, not waiting for her for even a second. Their next stop was the Black Inn. He resumed his lessons on street smarts. You should ask the beggars from the beggar sect for directions. Looking at the bustling crowd, of course, it wasn't easy to find them. You just have to rely on your senses and your internal energy. Before he could finish, Gawa nearly choked on a pungent, overwhelming scent from someone passing by. Gion had forgotten one important detail. You could also identify them by their smell. This guy was none other than a beggar from the sect, and upon hearing Gion's name, the old man recognized him immediately. I was the target of the Assassin Guild. They were hunting him so intensely that everyone knew about it. This man called himself Incheon. Moreover, even the rumor about Gion having a disciple had spread throughout the martial arts world. I was extremely worried because the Assassin Guild had power equal to the 9 major sects. So, they had to be extremely careful. The Assassin Guild, the Blood Gate, and the Shadow Sword were 3 demonic sects, also known as top-tier assassins. If you were targeted by them, you'd be lucky to keep your life. Yet the master and disciple Gion hadn't even lost a piece of flesh. It left him completely stunned. After asking Incheon about the Black Inn, he took Gawa there to buy the Black Poison Hand, a type of poison that can be transmitted through both hands. He also managed to purchase a special item called the 10,000 Vision Array, which can track an enemy's every move. After wrapping up his shopping, Gion took the girl to find a gang that could help them. For 10 days, Incheon had to listen to his subordinates jabbering away, but he still wanted to save face and boasted that his gang was afraid of absolutely no one. So, Gion paid the guy's fee, even though he only had 2 coins to his name. Seeing the 2 broke teacher and student in front of him, Incheon couldn't bring himself to refuse and eventually agreed. Because Gion had been targeted by dangerous assassination attempts lately, he wanted to leave the girl there for her own safety. Before leaving, Gawa gave Gion a goodbye hug. The touching scene brought tears to their eyes, and they vowed to give their all to keep Gawa safe during those 10 days. With that, Gion dashed off like the wind, because he had already set a trap, just waiting for the fish to bite. Prior to this, he had asked Incheon to help him spread a rumor. It would be a spectacular trick for them. At that moment, everyone acted as if they believed Gion would face them head-on. Sataka. The whole world was whispering that if the assassins couldn't take Gion down this time, they'd be the laughingstock of the martial arts world. The news conveniently reached the person sitting in the back. With his face covered, the man was so furious he crushed his teacup. Meanwhile, after a long, high-speed journey, Gion stopped in front of a forest far from the village. I then took the time to set up the 10,000 Vision Array, but he waited until dark and not a single soul showed up. I was trying to use the lure the tiger off the mountain strategy, the 16th maneuver from Sun Tzu's Art of War, to draw the target out. Jian just sat there, waiting. Once the assassins stepped inside the 10,000 vision array, their positions were immediately transmitted to him. Since guests had arrived and he had neither tea nor snacks to offer, Gion reached for his own poisonous darts. He had spent a fortune buying them as a gift for these guys. By the time the assassins realized what was happening, they were pinned all over like hedgehogs caught in a downpour. Using the darts to pinpoint their locations, the group found him and charged. But Gion just stood in the middle of the clearing, calmly waiting for his prey. The moment they poked their heads out and swarmed in, they were blasted back by his sword aura. However, one expert remained standing, forcing Gion to leap into the air. He dived straight down, but his blade was blocked by a clawed hand, the assassin's mysterious hidden weapon. The guy swiped at him, catching Gion off guard and knocking him backward. While his clothes were torn to shreds, the assassin gloated, thinking he had finished Gion off because his claws were coated in deadly poison. Yet Gion was completely fine, his skin flawless and unharmed. Only his clothes were ripped to pieces, leaving the opponent staring in absolute disbelief at this supposedly weakling of a kid. Gion was truly a monster. While the guy was still busy marveling at his strength, Gion shifted right beside him and struck. Sending him to the afterlife, he just brushed past the other assassins, who then collapsed to the ground. They had all been taken down by his sword aura. Gion could feel their strength, their sword paths, and their speed. As for the last assassin, he unleashed his finishing move, his body radiating a golden aura. With one swing of his blade, the last remaining enemy fell to join his cohorts. Gion had truly become a cold-blooded killing machine. Seeing him return safely, Gawa was overjoyed. Seeing Gion standing before him unscathed, Incheon was also incredibly shocked. With that fragile-looking frame of his, he had managed to wipe out over 100 assassins, which really opened the gang's eyes. It also meant that Sataka's reputation had been flushed down the drain. Conversely, Gion had brought great honor to the Chungnam sect. But at that moment, Elder Jiang realized the assassin's true intent was to target the Saemon treasures, so he chose the safer path, cooperating with the Martial Arts Alliance. And by now, they had no intention of letting them off the hook. For the evil they had committed over the last 6 months, the Martial Arts Alliance acted on behalf of heaven to punish the wicked, hunting down the Sataka group and inflicting heavy losses on them. So, they finally gave up on assassinating Gion. As he continued his journey, he met the chief steward of the Thuongdan Hokan residence. Their Thuongdan group had formed a partnership with Chung Nam sect this year. So, when they learned he was coming, they welcomed him. Naturally, they had a favor to ask, which was why they invited Gion to the estate. As soon as they arrived, he was treated to a lavish feast. Just as the rumors said, Thuongdan was truly the most prosperous place in Hebei province. The guest room he was given was incredibly majestic. Gion had just learned they wanted to ask him for help, with something involving force, when suddenly he sensed someone with over 15 years of inner energy approaching them. He wondered what these people were planning to ask for. This Thuongdan group was actually a merchant guild, wielding immense power through their trade businesses. This time, they wanted Gion to participate in a competition, because recently, a new rising merchant guild called the Dai Tian Merchant Group had provoked them, claiming they couldn't supply rare materials to the imperial court. That wouldn't be worth mentioning, if it weren't for the involvement of the Hebei sect leader himself, who was trying to pull a risky stunt. Because of Gion's fame for surviving the Sataka group alone, the leader placed his trust in him to handle this situation. Because there was a letter from Chungnam requesting assistance, Gion agreed to step in and save the day. But of course it came with conditions. The man had to provide the necessary essentials. Since they had to deal with the Hebei sect, he needed a manual for a similar blade technique, and a martial arts instructor similar to their sect, but more importantly, Gion also demanded mooncakes for his star pupil. But before Gawa could even try to decline, he chimed in to request candied hawthorn skewers as well, leaving the boss of Hokan speechless. The manuals he asked for were already piled on the table, and they were worth over 400 taels of silver. Suddenly, Gion flipped to the heaven-breaking Demon Dao manual. It was a type of martial art created by eccentric people, now lost to the world of martial arts. It was rarely talked about. Seeing his new toy, Gawa was incredibly excited to learn it quickly. But inside Gion's head, apart from a love for money, he was obviously only thinking about snacking. After a full meal, he finally agreed to go to the training yard and demonstrate a few moves from the Chungnam sect for Gawa to admire, his speed as fast as lightning. Combined with his mysterious traits, their martial arts were now something everyone had to be wary of, and naturally, the Hebei sect also had a secret technique. He had to be extremely careful since he was on his own. Suddenly, someone appeared from behind and cut him off. Before he could even process what was happening, the guy came charging at him with a sword, even though he managed to block it. The killing intent, radiating from the guy, made Jian shudder with fear. He wondered who this was, daring to infiltrate the Hokan merchant group, and noticed the blade's cold edge looked like it was out for his life. Jian stopped holding back, determined to take this guy down. But just as he raised his sword, laughter erupted from somewhere. This was the person he had requested, the Blood Demon Master, Ganson. But the moment he met his employer, the guy immediately demanded payment for sparring with Gion, which made him sigh in annoyance. This guy was even more obsessed with money than he was. All the expenses for the martial arts duel between the two would be covered by the Hokan merchant group, so he could show off his skills with confidence. Ganson chuckled. He could sharpen his skills and make money at the same time. It was such a sweet deal. Seeing the greedy guy in front of him, Gion was actually quite pleased. And so, the two lunged at each other, neither giving an inch. But the sky-shattering monster arts he had just learned made Jian's swordsmanship more solid and stable, and with one strike, he sent Ganson flying. Seeing his prized student training so earnestly, Gion felt incredibly happy. He couldn't help but chuckle, remembering the time when his own master had guided and taught him as a child. Surely his master felt the same way back then. Meanwhile, the Hebei sect was having a meeting. The old master had started to take an interest in Gion, the guy who kept interfering in their business. Upon learning that he was the one who restored the long-lost secret techniques of the Zhongnan sect, no one knew how to handle this problem, because everyone knew Gion's power, and it was hard to take him down. The old master sipped his tea, thinking they might have to call off the operation, making everyone's faces go pale. After days of training with Ganson, there were only 10 days left, until the duel with the Hebei sect. But right now, Gion still didn't know how to become stronger because his goal this time was not just to help the Hokan merchant group. He always aimed to reach the transformation realm. To do that, he had to train his upper dantian, but the success rate was too low. If he failed, he'd end up a complete fool, so Gion had been trying every method he could to achieve it. I was stubborn about reaching the highest realm because it would allow him to do anything freely without limitations. That was enough lecturing for now. Gion took Gawa out for a walk. The moment he stepped onto the street, he wanted to find a noodle shop to fill his empty stomach. But the old man he just met wanted to drag Gion to the Tianfeng Inn, which was incredibly luxurious and filled with all kinds of delicacies. The food spread across the table made the two country bumpkins drool. Feeling someone watching him, he looked up and saw a group of people radiating murderous intent. They were from the Hebei sect. Right after they were introduced, they landed, and without asking who was right or wrong, they grabbed the old man by the collar and hauled him up. "I'm asking you, who the hell do you think you are to talk about me?" Seeing such injustice right before his eyes, Gion turned red with anger, veins popping as he slammed his hand on the table. Someone interjecting into his business made the guy furious, and he shoved the old man aside. Hearing Gion's stinging insults, suddenly another old man, wearing the Hebei sect's attire, stepped out, only to get a cold bucket of reality thrown at him, silenced completely by Gion's logical arguments. So the old man, shameless as he was, prepared to draw his sword. Humph. Seeing that this lot didn't care about reason and only wanted to use violence, Gion decided to drive them crazy by threatening to report them to the Martial Alliance. The punk was triggered and swung his blade to attack, but with just a flick of his finger, he sent him flying 8 meters away. So the old man standing nearby ordered his followers to swarm him, trying to bully him with numbers. But that attack was completely meaningless as, in the blink of an eye, Gion teleported behind him. Seeing Gion's crazed expression made the old man want to soil his pants. He turned tail and ran. Having dealt with the pests, Gion continued his quest for food. The confrontation spread quickly, and the power of public opinion brought the story to the ears of the princess. This girl, born into wealth and status, was obsessed with gossip and ordered her men to find out everything about Gion. By this point, the underlings informed the Hebei boss that Gion's skill was far superior to his, and he started to panic. They had to change their strategy, and of course it wasn't going to be anything clean. They wanted to kill Gion before he could step into the ring to fight him. The day of the duel arrived, but there were more soldiers than usual because Princess Manhwa was also a gossip who came to watch the drama. As soon as the match started, Gion sensed that this guy's internal energy was stronger than the previous two because he had taken the potential suppression pill to boost his power for 3 hours, though it would take more than half a year to recover. Of course, that couldn't hide from his keen eyes. Yet the guy was in such a rush to eliminate Gion that he charged in, but things didn't go according to his plan at all. I was able to block the attack easily. When it came to a contest of strength, Gion was naturally superior to the old man who was 1 foot in the grave. He channeled his energy, his entire body radiating an incredibly powerful aura. This was a battle of raw power. Provoked, the old man naturally flew into a rage. The sword suddenly turned into a flame, aimed at the old man's vitals. Gion insisted on using his signature move, the 736 Sword of the World, creating countless sword auras that rained down on him like a storm. By the time he managed to block it, the floor was riddled with cracks left by the sword energy. Facing his power, the old man was still determined to win. So his entire body was engulfed in flames, the 9 Moons' ultimate technique. Without hesitation, he quickly slashed with the 5 Tiger Severing Blade. Although the power was a bit overwhelming, Gion managed to draw his sword and block it in time. The entire arena was bathed in a blinding light until they could see clearly again. Then Gion stood there, pointing his sword at the man sprawled on the ground. Nearly losing his life made him break into a cold sweat, but at least he managed to secure a victory for the Merchant Guild. After the battle, Gion rushed into the kitchen to show Gawa his ice-making magic. He took a piece of ice and shaved it down into a fine slush. Hai then topped it with a layer of red beans. As soon as the girl took a bite, she was stunned. It was so delicious. Everyone loved it, especially since none of them had ever tasted anything like it before. Gion's entrepreneurial brain immediately clicked into gear. Snap! He named it Ice Fairy Dew and prepared to sell it. It even convinced the princess to visit their home in person. It wasn't just her. High-ranking officials wanted to taste this Ice Fairy Dew too. So, the master of the Merchant Guild begged Gion to show off his skills in the kitchen, forcing Gion to take on this boring chore once again. There was one thing Gawa couldn't understand. Why the Merchant Guild leader acted so timidly around Gion. Obviously, it was because he was asking for favors. Otherwise, who would be free enough to work for nothing? Once the ice was prepared, he handed everything over to the chefs and felt free enough to practice stretching with Gawa. Or so he thought. Gion just lazily sat in a corner supervising the girls' training. He was mid-yawn when someone suddenly ran up to announce that Manhwa, the princess, wanted to see his face. Gion's face drained of all color. Princess Yonghua was the emperor's favorite daughter and, thanks to her natural talent, the owner of countless shady businesses. She had achieved the highest realm of martial arts just by practicing for a little while. But because she was a woman, she had no right to inherit the throne. Yet she was now very interested in someone special. When asked about the Ice Fairy Dew, Gion had refused any personal reward, but the princess insisted on granting him a request. Seeing this, he hesitated for a moment. He finally opened his mouth to ask for a secret manual to train the upper dantian. This request made her burst into laughter. She hadn't expected him to be more interested in martial arts than fame or fortune. Upon learning this, Gion was practicing the path of the secular world, so she generously granted his wish. Once he got what he wanted, he left, though he couldn't help but marvel at the fact that her internal energy was more than double his own. Gion was taken to the Imperial Martial Library. Since it was hard to find what he needed in just 12 hours, he sat down and studied the entire stack from morning until the time was up. Gion learned a great deal, from the profound heaven secret records to earth-walking techniques, all of which were very useful to him. The next day at the Merchant Guild, someone came with news. He needed to return to Chongnan, so Gion immediately set off, seen off warmly by the guild leader. It was getting dark, but the master and student were still hiking on foot. Gawa. She was in a rush, wondering when she would ever be even half as strong as Gion. Seeing his student so eager to learn, he agreed to her request to practice while they traveled that night. But seeing Gawa's pitiful expression, Gion stopped teasing her and agreed to rest at the village ahead. But that place was currently engulfed in a sea of flames, and a guy holding a machete was chasing down a helpless mother and child. People usually trip over banana peels, but she tripped over a corpse and fell headlong. The moment the guy rushed at them with his blade, they were as good as dead. But suddenly, out of nowhere, someone put dozens of holes in that guy. He collapsed and died on the spot, leaving the mother and child completely bewildered. The one who acted with such righteousness was none other than Gaon, who was trembling with rage as he ordered the bandits to stop. While he was radiating heat and anger, all the bandits turned their attention to Gaon. From afar, they hadn't seen him clearly, but as he drew closer, the whole lot of them started breaking into a cold sweat. Sensing he was a formidable martial artist, they still didn't value their lives and tried to use their numbers to overwhelm Gaon. But at this moment, he was like a single mother, a dragon carrying her child on her back. Seeing the battlefield they had created, sparing neither the old nor the young, Gaon once again unleashed his power. Just as they charged, a single wave of his hand sent them all flying far away. In the blink of an eye, they were all sent packing to the afterlife. Not a single one was left behind. The remaining group on the other side, seeing the murderous look on Gaon's face, they hitched up their pants and ran for their lives. Naturally, he wasn't about to let them get away that easily. Just as he was about to give chase, the old man on the ground woke up, coughing violently. Gaon quickly caught him and used his healing arts to save him. It turned out the ones behind this were none other than the demonic cult. They had transferred demonic arts to the bandits so they could run rampant, destroying villages and homes. Seeing this, the man laughed like a maniacal runaway because of the demonic cult's depraved amusement. So now, Gaon had to break his back healing person after person because there were so many severely injured people and he was all alone. So he couldn't handle it all. Fortunately, in that life-or-death moment, the people he had asked for help arrived. That kid Gongsun had brought along the secular disciples and doctors to save the day. Everyone pitched in, and the progress sped up. By dusk, everything was finally done. Gaon and Gawa lay there panting like two tired dogs. Now, Gongsun had rebuilt his family and even brought men to help. 3 years later, when his grandchild turned 6, he would take the child as his disciple and initiate them into the Jongnan sect. Speaking of disciples, Gaon only now noticed Gawa sleeping so hard she was drooling. Gongsun worked very efficiently. In no time at all, he had found the bandits' nearby hideout. It was called Fire Dragon Camp. Without needing to say much, Gaon grabbed his sword and went to take the life of every single one of them. He was already at the foot of their fortress, but the guard was still yawning, unaware of anything. A yawn was cut short by a strike that knocked him unconscious. The other 2 guards were terrified, not realizing a monster was right behind them. In the blink of an eye, Gaon drove his elbows into the pressure points of both of them. After clearing out the guards, he felt the evil aura of the demonic cult, radiating from the building ahead, and there was an incredible expert inside as well. There were up to 600 bandits. Gaon was, of course, furious. The demonic cult's fingerprints were everywhere. If you don't pull out the weeds by the root, they never learn to fear you. So, Gaon stepped inside aggressively. Inside were cages holding the villagers who had been kidnapped. One little girl was crying nonstop from fear, which annoyed a nearby bandit who wanted to cut out her tongue, but Gaon appeared behind him and struck. The guy went unconscious, and then Gaon quickly drove his sword into the stomach of another guy charging toward him. Having cleared them out, he reassured the child that he would set her free as soon as it was safe. This prison was huge, holding both adults and children. Gaon didn't know their intentions yet, but he was furious. At this moment, another explosion occurred in the Breeze Sword Hall. Make them pay. 2 of them were hiding behind a wagon. Looking at his attire, one could easily tell Gaon was from the Chongnam sect. Once they heard that, they immediately realized who he was, the legendary Taoist everyone was buzzing about. But before they could even finish their thought, they were skewered, dead in their tracks. Of course, Gaon wasn't going to let a single one of them live. He wanted them to know what it felt like to be hunted down to the bitter end. Suddenly, aggressive figures appeared on the other side of the gate. 4 top-tier experts stepped out, and the largest one was clearly the leader. He barked an order for everyone to attack. Gaon's eyes flashed, shifting into the zone. In the blink of an eye, he took down all 4 of them without breaking a sweat. He quickly aimed for the leader, but the man blocked him with his blade. Out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning struck both of them, supercharging Gaon, but the man was still like a brick wall, impossible to push back. Seeing that, he unleashed the 5 Thunderfinger directly at the man's bald head. He roasted him to a crisp. But even then, the man was still grinning from ear to ear. Despite the internal injuries, he stood firm as if he hadn't even been scratched. So, it was the man's turn to strike. He swung his sword, overflowing with demonic energy, but it just slammed into the floor tiles without hitting a soul, because Gion had already teleported behind him and delivered a palm strike. He was just too fast, too dangerous. There was no way the man could have dodged it. The guy was driven into the ground, creating a massive crater, like he was digging his own grave. It was over. Gion had just turned around, but before he could leave, he heard the man laughing again. Hard to kill, like a parasite. The man was completely shrouded in demonic aura. Even though his clothes were shredded, his skin looked smooth and flawless, showing no signs of having been beaten. One look and Gion knew it was demonic arts, specifically the undying blood contagion technique. But whatever it was, he was determined to take the man's head today. Provoked, the man's malevolent aura expanded, covering a huge area. But the moment he lunged forward, Gion agilely leapt into the air, realizing he was being toyed with by the man's arrogance. The man grew even more enraged and thrust his sword forward, but Gion blocked it effortlessly with his tiny blade. On top of that, his energy was flowing from his sword right into the man's body. He was like a portable lantern, neutralizing all of the man's killing intent. Not bothering to waste any more breath, Gion lightly flicked his sword and delivered a strike straight to the leader's throat, sending him on his way to the afterlife. The remaining bandits had no choice but to surrender. Gongsun arrived shortly after to handle the lot and escort them to the magistrate. Then, they rescued the kidnapped villagers and sent them back home. With everything handed over to his nephew to deal with, Gion headed back and treated himself to a relaxing bath. He now knew why they had been kidnapping innocent people. They were draining their life force to cultivate their arts. That was how the leader's body was able to recover at such a terrifying speed. Just thinking about it made Gion's blood boil. He decided he would show no mercy to any demonic cultist he met. When the cultist heard that the bandits' Fire Dragon Fortress had burned down, he didn't care at all. It didn't affect his plans to spark a war between the Evil Blood Union and the Murim Alliance. Meanwhile, Gion was stuck doing paperwork. I was incredibly bored. Suddenly, Gongsun rushed in, frantic. The sect had issued an emergency summons because the Murim Alliance was launching an all-out campaign against the bandits. Plus, the government was involved, backed by elite soldiers. Faced with that, Gion couldn't just sit still. Hai told Gawa to get ready to move. At this moment, another Fire Dragon Fortress had been completely wiped out by a young man who declared himself the sect leader of the martial immortals to the bandits. He sent the leader to the afterlife with a single strike, despite his extraordinary skill and having reached the level of Sword Ki. Even so, he had sustained internal injuries. This was the boy, Trio Mu, all grown up, warned by his grandfather about the spreading demonic arts, and now the leader of the martial immortals. Deciding to head back, Gion couldn't stop grumbling about Gongsun clinging to him. Even though this guy was already a top-tier expert, he was still too scared to go off on his own. Gion mentioned the child, who Gongsun would eventually take on as a disciple. He wasn't sure yet if the kid had the talent. But it didn't matter, because training the boy to become a top-tier expert would be enough. He patted Gongsun on the shoulder, saying that no matter the situation, as long as he asked, Gion would definitely help. He thought it would move the guy to tears. But surprisingly, Gongsun just stood there frozen. His hands were clenched tight, his expression unreadable. Once Gion returned, he joined the troops. Wiping out the bandits wasn't just a job for the authorities, and the Chungnam sect had decided to lend a hand. So, his master led the way. But along the journey, Gion nagged like an old woman. He didn't want the Chungnam sect involved, fearing he'd have to watch his own brothers fall. He questioned why their sect had to follow when the government had it covered. But he got an earful from his master for his rebellious attitude. He had sent Gion away to practice asceticism, yet now he came back and talked back 10 times for every word spoken. Seeing the disciple he raised like a son hit his rebellious phase gave the master a headache. Meanwhile, the Mount Hua sect had gathered in full force, including Elder Hoya and the supreme expert, Hyanja. They wanted to use this opportunity to wipe out the bandits first, to reclaim their reputation in the eyes of the world. They would launch the attack tomorrow to restore Mount Hua's prestige. They couldn't stand being ranked below the Chungnam sect. As for their own group, They were scouting the situation using a map, and the master ordered 2 guys to take some disciples and scout ahead. As for the long-haired lad, he asked him to check the map. What could he do? After studying it for a moment, he found a better route and offered to lead a few men to clear the dense brush for easier travel. Then he proposed a tactical move, opening a path toward the rear. Once the master agreed, he ordered them to get to work. Gion, having nothing to do, just slacked off. He started worrying about things before their time, wondering what level of strength was truly enough. He remembered putting Gawa in danger earlier. If he hadn't made it in time, he wouldn't know how to face the girl's mother. The very thought of it gave Gion a splitting headache, so he decided to just skip anything that felt too difficult. Forget it. I'll deal with the immediate problems first, he muttered, leading the men to clear the trees and forge a path. Suddenly, arrows rained down, but he sliced through them all with a single swing of his sword. With that, the Chongnam sect reached the stronghold in no time. Gion took the lead and shattered the barricade at the gate with one strike. Everything was going so smoothly when suddenly he heard someone laughing. A thick, dark mist enveloped all the disciples. Gion recognized it immediately. It was dark magic. While everyone else was panicking, not knowing how to escape, he remained completely relaxed, even thinking he'd like to learn this technique if he had the time later. Using the power of his Tai at Chi Kong Quan, Gion could see straight through the mist and right through the gate. He spotted an old man completely covered in cloaks. Having identified his target, he immediately channeled his energy, forming a vortex in his palm and expanding it into a massive whirlwind. I blew away the screen of dark energy. Seeing the boy destroy his dark arts with just one hand, the old man was stunned, but within 3 seconds, he started laughing again. Gion decided it was time to show him who he was dealing with. With a single leap, he jumped from outside to inside, aiming his sword straight at the man's head, but the old man blocked him. Outside, the master ordered his disciples to advance. Cuff these bandits! Naturally, they weren't pushovers. There was a leader wielding an axe, and on top of that, 3 elite experts. Malice radiated from them. The master slashed out with a blade of energy, but they dispelled it easily. Before he knew it, the bandits had surrounded him. From behind, the master had miscalculated. 8 more elite experts had appeared. Meanwhile, Gion was busy interrogating the old man. He asked how many elite experts they had. The man was on the verge of death, but let a secret slip. Gion possessed the face of a half-dragon, one with the true potential of a dragon. But the old man mocked him, saying he was just a cruel brute who could never play the role of a hero. Infuriated, Gion decided to send him to the afterlife. The old man still had some fight left, his hands emitting streams of black smoke, but to his surprise, Gion just did a backflip in midair. I then used his trusty sword to bring it crashing straight down. Just when he thought it would be easier after knocking the weapon away, he didn't expect the man's secret weapon. Hands made entirely of copper coins hidden beneath his robes. That was the old man's true power, his whole body seeping dark energy. That filthy stuff immediately wrapped around Gion's body, forming 2 massive giant hands. They lunged at the speed of light. Gion quickly unleashed his 5 thunder technique to block, but the opponent's strength was overwhelming, pushing the hands closer and closer to him. But since Gion is the protagonist, he not only pushed the attack back, but smashed the old man into the wall with the 5 thunder blast. Seeing Gion rushing forward, the old man, desperate to save his pathetic life, controlled the dark energy like a sentient being to wrap around Gion's feet. This was a binding spell, tightening its grip and slowly swallowing him up. But with this piddling little trick, how could it possibly stop him? Since Gion couldn't move, he stood his ground to show the old man the true power of the 5 thunder technique. His attack transformed into the shape of a dragon. It opened its mouth to snap at the old man's head, but suddenly a flash of light appeared right before his eyes. In the empty space, the old man had managed to escape. Gion quickly turned back to support his brothers. The master was currently fighting 4 or 5 elite experts alone and was struggling a bit. On the other side, senior brother Seung was also being cornered. He had 2 guys in front of him and another one trying to sneak an attack from behind. But before he could even act, the attacker was sliced in 2 by a massive surge of power. Gion had returned just in time to save him. His presence immediately drew the attention of the entire mob. Gion raised his hand and commanded Breaking Moon, sending beams of light like transparent darts piercing through each of them. Facing his furious expression, even the bandits and the Chungnam disciples were terrified. Gaon suddenly and aggressively declared that if they surrendered, he would spare their lives. This left the master and the disciples speechless as the wave of bandits dropped their weapons. With them kneeling, begging for their lives, the Chungnam sect achieved a glorious victory. And because of this battle, every disciple of the sect was able to witness the true strength of Gaon, which they had only heard of through rumors. Meanwhile, at the bandits' main camp, which was being ravaged by the Huashan sect, only a handful of survivors remained. When the sect leader heard the news, he was shocked. He punched a hole through his table. He had to find out the deep-seated reason. How could there be such power behind those bandits? The sect leader vowed to make those bandits understand the wrath of Huashan. The upper Dantian refers to the brain. Jian knew his master had reached the transformation realm. His brain was different from other martial artists. There were 4 types of martial arts he had researched in the Imperial Palace that helped enhance brain function. Among them, Jian had learned the Heavenly Brain Force, a method to channel internal energy to the brain, though it had to be done with extreme caution. He began to practice, but after only a little while, he was woken up by Gawa. The girl came to tell him that the Huashan sect had sent 5,000 more troops to the mountain stronghold. Hearing the good news, he was happy. He could use this time to train and become stronger. After all, time passes and never returns, so it couldn't be wasted like that. But Gawa was still too young to understand what counted as wasted and couldn't distinguish right from wrong. Gion explained it to her in a way she could understand. You have to live life with appreciation. You shouldn't just let it slip by. After having her mindset enlightened, the girl began to train to improve herself. After lecturing the nation's future, Gion felt very satisfied. As a model master. At that moment, the military general ordered his soldiers to prepare to set out tomorrow to wipe out the bandits and rid the people of this menace. With that, they glared at the Manhwa sect leader and stormed off in a huff. Useless Taoist bums can't do anything right. That same night, the bandits got a massive upgrade, bulking up with bulging muscles, and started slaughtering the Chungnam sect members. But suddenly, something exploded behind them, sending one bandit flying through the air before he hit the ground like a pile of rotting meat. Before he could even figure out what was happening, a woman appeared behind him. The one wielding the sword, moving with lightning speed to take on these despicable bandits, was none other than Senior Sister John. With just a single strike, she wiped out the rest of them. The very ground cracked under the impact. Noticing something strange about the corpses, she stepped closer to inspect them. Based on their energy, she could tell this wasn't just ordinary demonic energy. It was likely demonic essence. Just as she was worried about whether a new force had emerged, someone called for a gathering, cutting off John's train of thought. Rongnam was the one leading this expedition. Everyone in the sect was injured, though it didn't seem life-threatening. They started preparing to leave. They planned to head to the town ahead to rest. As they traveled, she couldn't help but worry about Gaon, wondering how he was doing. The royal army had camped out near the great mountain stronghold. The general ordered a guard detail and a solid battle formation to be set up. Meanwhile, at the bandits' headquarters, this bearded man was a disciple of the Demon Lord, a member of the demonic cult. He was the one backing the boss of the great mountain stronghold, a guy bigger than a wagon wheel. These guys were still acting so nonchalant. That's because they had set up a protective barrier. No one could get through. Still, the boss didn't want to get complacent, so he decided to unleash a horde of zombies just to spice up the show. Besides, they had over 800 men at the stronghold, enough to hold their own against the royal troops. But the goatee man had another plan, using their army of monsters. They also had assassins, not to kill, obviously, but just to mess with those royal court soldiers. Since he was basically watching a show, the boss naturally agreed and ordered his men to follow that plan. By now, the troops had reached the foot of the mountain, but the fog was so thick they couldn't push any deeper. Before they could grasp the situation, thousands of arrows rained down on them. Half the troops were taken out instantly. But these weren't pushovers. They were elite soldiers, prepared for this, and they retaliated with fire arrows. As the fire arrows slammed into the mountain, smoke began to billow. Seeing the mountain ablaze, the general figured the bandits' morale must have plummeted. I immediately ordered his troops to retreat, but they hadn't even turned around when everyone suddenly heard something. As a bell tolled from somewhere, His question was answered when a gargantuan zombie appeared before him, clutching a massive axe. The soldiers attacked with fervor, but the creature's body seemed reinforced. Every spear they thrust at it just snapped in two. Before they could even come up with another plan, a whole army of zombies appeared. They couldn't win, and the soldiers started fleeing in a panic. Word of the zombies reached the general. Baffled by how such pathetic bandits could summon zombies, he ordered the whole army to prepare for battle. It was only then that the general realized these weren't just common village nuisances. They were puppets of the demonic cult. Back at the Chungnam sect, the master had given him the Tai Yiqian Kon book, containing the entire legacy of their sect. This was everything the Chungnam sect had lost. But no matter how he looked at it, Gion still found it impossible to decipher. Exactly because it was difficult, the master entrusted it to him. If it were easy, he would have done it himself. Naturally, he wanted Gion to focus on the sect's martial arts and stop trying to poach everyone else's techniques. But seeing how stubborn he was about stealing moves and digging around, the master could only sigh. He held his head in exasperation, speechless, do whatever you want. After winning the match, Gion obediently started studying the sect's manual. Meanwhile, in the forest near the Great Mountain stronghold, there were countless soldier corpses. Hearing that over 2,000 soldiers were lost, the general was furious and smashed the table. They had thought these pests were just run-of-the-mill bandits. But they didn't expect them to be using demonic arts, which is why, no matter how much the soldiers tried to defend, the arrows pierced through them with ease. Plus, the mindless zombies kept attacking day and night without rest, and with the treacherous terrain, the soldiers were dying of exhaustion and the cold in the forest. Lost in the fog and having successfully provoked the general, he refused to give up and ordered the troops to regroup. But suddenly, a voice appeared out of nowhere. It made the general panic and lash out at the air with his weapon. Suddenly, a wisp of green energy gradually took the form of a human. It reached out with an arm that wasn't even fully formed, and immediately, hands shot out from the ground, clawing and wrapping around him. Before death claimed him, it identified itself as an evil spirit. The hands completely engulfed the general, and no one knew what happened, until a piercing scream rang out. At that moment, Gion was still diligently practicing the secret arts of the Chungnam sect. But no matter how much he pondered it, he couldn't grasp a single thing written inside. Even a genius, or the grandfather of all geniuses, couldn't understand this. So Gion decided to let it go and fill his stomach first. The master and student ate like starving tigers. Gawa was truly picking up all of Gion's bad habits. Gongsun looked on, speechless. But being constantly shadowed by this kid, Gion found it annoying and asked, "Why don't you go follow your own master?" In the blink of an eye, he'd polished off a table full of food and then wanted to go get some cake for Gawa. Gongsun, sitting nearby, felt jealous seeing that. But since he was huge as an elephant and a top-tier master, he could get it himself, little brother. Someone came running to announce that Gion needed to get to the elders' meeting immediately. Obviously, there's no other reason, since every single one of those soldiers was wiped out. Losing 5,000 men is bound to make the emperor go absolutely ballistic. But the pressing issue right now is how to deal with that massive mountain stronghold. According to our intel, the ringleaders are the Mountain Lord and that advisor guy, Daude from the demonic cult. Hearing that, Master panicked. He never expected that guy to still be alive, but then again, that old demonic devil is still kicking after all. So how could he possibly let his own disciple ascend to the heavens? But while the seniors were at a total loss for what to do, Gion spoke up with an idea. Since the old saying goes, "Know yourself and know your enemy to win 100 battles," he suggested sending someone to scout out their information. It was a steal, but there was one huge problem. Not everyone has the skill to go and actually make it back. So, Gion stepped forward to volunteer. He wanted a little thrill and adventure. Naturally, his master refused, worried sick about his safety. Others were anxious that if something happened to Gion, the future pillar of the Chungnam sect would be gone. Then, Elder Zhang cut the argument short. He agreed to let him go scout, but because it was so dangerous, he couldn't let Gion take it on alone. So, he decided to send a master from the beggar sect to help, plus 2 top-tier experts from their own sect. Despite all the protests, Elder Zhang stuck to his decision and entrusted the mission to Gion. He hoped that Gion would find his path to enlightenment through this journey. With that trust placed in him, he was determined to pull off the mission perfectly. Meanwhile, the Blood Lotus sect was watching the demonic cult's every move, and they had even managed to kidnap a demon. With her in their hands, creating zombies would be child's play. Just then, a beggar kid appeared, all covered in grime but with a beautiful, bright face. Seeing Jian get all starry-eyed over a fresh piece of meat, senior brother Seo Yoon gave him a smack on the head. This kid was actually a descendant of the beggar sect. Even though he looked like such a sweet baby, he was actually a martial arts genius. At only 15 years old, this kid had already mastered all of the beggar sect's legendary martial arts, including 2 pinnacle divine techniques. Jian had no choice but to perform the proper greetings and show his respect. The kid was satisfied with being called Little Hero. A second ago, he was all smiles, but when it came to business, he was dead serious, and his intelligence was absolutely spot on. Over 4,000 Taoists from the Manhwa sect had charged in alone. Driven by pride and the desire for public acclaim, they wanted to claim the glory for themselves. After updating their info, the little hero turned around, wanting to chat while they walked. By now, they were closing in on the mountain stronghold, having entered their fog formation. Gion took the lead to guide them. Since this was the kid's specialty, Jian used his own sharp eyes to pierce through the mist. He spotted an assassin sitting on a tree branch and immediately signaled Seo Yoon. Without a word, Seo Yoon unleashed his flying sword technique, launching it straight at the guy. Suddenly, a sword came flying out of nowhere. The assassin was caught completely off guard, couldn't react in time, and was run through. After taking him out, Seo Yoon effortlessly commanded the sword back into its sheath. After that, they all kept moving. 2 bald guys wearing red headbands were on guard duty when senior brother Seo Yoon's sword flew toward them. One of them reacted quickly and drew his blade to block, but that wasn't all. Senior sister John suddenly appeared right behind them, and just like that, she sent one of them off to meet his ancestors. The other guy just stood there like a statue, staring at her. Luckily, Gion stepped in to save the day, pulling off a narrow escape. He played the hero, then turned around to tease her. John was still way too green. The most serious one in the group was Zhang. He was super diligent about mapping the place. After a while, he finished, looking incredibly satisfied with his work. Seeing that, the other guy couldn't help but marvel at this young artist's talent. Suddenly, the little hero looked at Gion with sparkling eyes. Over the last 7 days of scouting, the kid had grown to really admire him. Both of these kids were so sharp. Gion couldn't help but feel embarrassed having to perform the 3 rituals he thought were just such a hassle. With the mission accomplished, everyone went their separate ways. All the way back, Gion wouldn't stop whining about wanting to soak in a hot spring. He sounded just like an old lady. Still, that scouting trip provided a complete map, which the government and the Manhwa sect also got a hold of through the beggar sect. Back at their sect, they were arguing about policy. Should they cooperate with the Chungnam sect or not? They were incredibly greedy, wanting support while also hungry for fame. The 2 of them bickered back and forth until their useless sect leader finally snapped and slammed his hand on the table. Everyone else was worried about reputation, but Gion was worried about his own martial arts. He'd been using other sects' techniques all this time, and now he was being told to only use Chungnam's style. That was going to be tough. Seo Yoon saw him pulling his hair out and came over to ask what was wrong. Hearing that Gion wanted to learn the sect's galactic sky stance, he was totally shocked. Had this guy finally seen the light? But then he saw Gion laughing it off. "I'm a Chungnam disciple, isn't it only natural?" The senior brother could only sigh. "Seriously, why haven't you been training all this time, you idiot?" Getting back to the point, he came to find you just to warn Manhwa, and yet he went off to play the hero and seek his own death again, leaving Gion completely speechless. It's just classic dying for clout, and it's a damn shame about the disciples who followed his orders and died for nothing. Even now, the goat-bearded guy is sitting in his room, yet he somehow knows every single move they make. Outside, he watched the Manhwa disciples mindlessly rushing into danger. He gave a command and immediately some bald guy appeared to the right. He sent him to report to the camp leader about the group. Manhwa. Then he ordered the guy on the left to tell the 4 fiends to give their sect leader a warm welcome. With those orders, both of them vanished in an instant. The goat-bearded guy flashed a grin. It was his playtime now. He was going to show these people exactly what the Demon Lord's disciples were capable of right on Manhwa's doorstep. According to the map, it would take them another hour to reach the main stronghold. but the sect leader wanted to push the pace so the bandits wouldn't have time to use their dark arts. So along the way, he suddenly sensed something. He quickly ordered everyone to draw their swords and brace themselves. Immediately, a hail of arrows rained down. Luckily, they were prepared and managed to deflect them, but that wasn't all. Just as the sect leader was bragging, his disciples behind him were getting flattened by boulders. When he finally realized what was happening, he saw the bandits on the cliffs, frantically pushing rocks down. No matter how fast they ran, they couldn't escape being crushed. Losing his patience, the sect leader ordered 20 men to head up there. Wipe out those stone-throwing bastards! Once the troops charged up, he led the rest of them toward the main camp, all of them burning with intensity, charging like missiles. Little did they know, back at the bandits' base, they were already fully aware of the 2,500 of them, and naturally, they were ready to welcome Manhwa at any moment. The camp leader quickly stood up, grabbing the massive axe hanging on the wall. He wore an incredibly amused expression, looking forward to toying with the Manhwa sect leader. Right now, the sect leader was leading his troops, hacking through the thorny fences, then they all burst through the gate. Of course, it wasn't going to be that easy. Everyone was clearly confused. The scene was bizarre. There was only one tiny house in front of them. They had been transported into a different dimension. Someone started laughing right in their faces. It was that goat-bearded guy who set up this trap to toy with these small fries. While everyone was in a panic, he demanded they play a game. If Manhwa found the Bloodlight troop first, they would win. Otherwise, they'd pay with their pathetic lives. As soon as he shouted, "Start!" fire erupted from nowhere, spreading rapidly, followed by countless arrows firing into the mix. Even though they slashed through them, a massive, supersized orb of dark energy appeared. When it detonated, many Manhwa disciples were left foaming at the mouth with their eyes rolling back. That one-shot sweep had significantly thinned their numbers. Through the dark mist, the camp leader walked out, dragging his axe. The Manhwa sect leader had no idea what he wanted. But whatever the hell it was, the mocking grin on that guy's face was enough to make his blood boil. He was a sect leader, for crying out loud. How could he be so blatantly disrespected? Enraged, he raised his sword to kill him, but the camp leader remained perfectly calm, swinging his huge axe in one clean arc. The ground was sliced in two like butter. Only then did the sect leader realize the man in front of him was the camp leader himself, which was why he dared to look down on Manhwa's blade. He drew his sword, channeling his violet mist divine art. After a flurry of movements, a flower appeared at the tip of his blade, the 24 petals of the plum blossom sword technique. Just when he thought he had it, it turned into a rolling flower. The camp leader focused, his body engulfed in the black energy of the demonic cult. He raised his axe. It unleashed a massive, towering wave of axe energy. With one strike, he shattered the Manhwa sect leader's defense, leaving him in excruciating pain. The camp leader just flashed a triumphant smile, not even losing a single hair. Back then, Jian was practicing the Supreme Arts Palm with great focus, but after he fired it, he felt like something was missing, so he decided to do it again. Immediately after the Supreme Arts Palm, Jian had to trigger the evil water thunder. Hai instantly channeled his internal energy to turn it into 5 thunder true human. Next was the dragon-grasping hand and the poison dragon hand. Who knows what was going through Gion's head to train them all in succession like that. Because of that, he finally understood that the supreme arts formed a linked circle. They couldn't be separated. He had just thought of it and hadn't even tested it when Gongsun barged in. He came running in a panic because he needed to tell him the sect leader was calling for him. Gion dragged his sorry self to see Old Man Zhang, only to find him looking deep in thought. It made him sweat bullets. It turned out that the silence was because the Manhwa sect had been completely wiped out at the main stronghold. The sect leader called him there, because the authorities decided to sweep them one more time. But fearing the main stronghold would catch wind of it and bolt, they needed to move before the Imperial Army arrived. Jian, the senior brother, and the senior sister needed to take a few disciples and head there. Hold them off first. He accepted the mission, determined to complete it perfectly. Old Man Zhang added an order to return alive and make the Chungnam name legendary. Before leaving, the three huddled up to discuss strategy. According to intelligence, the Bloodlight troop had 800 men and 36 coffins, not for burying them, but for holding zombies. Jian had grown accustomed to solo combat after his time wandering and begging. That's why Seon assigned him the commander position, to help him sharpen his observation skills. Supporting the other disciples, the immediate problem was the magic-using group trying to flee Shanxi province to reach the demonic cult. That was confirmed intel from the beggar sect. So, they had to move quickly. The blood monsters were sluggishly dragging coffins and zombies along at an incredibly slow pace. Jian had been waiting for them for nearly half an hour. Then, he finally decided to show up. 2 days ago, the three of them had sneaked off, splitting from the other disciples to scout ahead. Seeing Jian a bit anxious, Seon mentioned the legendary General Zhang Fei. There was that famous battle, the one where Zhang Fei stood alone on the bridge to hold off an entire army. Seon and Gian exchanged a look, then looked at him with sparkling, playful eyes. So Gian went ahead and cosplayed as Zhang Fei, standing there to block over 100 bandits from the great mountain stronghold. Seeing a young man standing in the middle of the road, the stronghold leader roared, "Do you even know who you're dealing with, kid? You think you can just block my path?" Upon hearing Jian's name, the guy burst into a manic laugh, since everyone knew he was the most famous orthodox martial artist right now. He then turned and ordered his goatee-bearded lackey to deal with him. The guy obeyed, shaking the bell in his hand. Magical energy swirled all around, and the coffins, which had been tied shut, suddenly burst wide open. The zombies sprang out of the coffins and charged ferociously. Seeing those rotting corpses closing in, Gian didn't hesitate. He tossed his sword behind him. One of them threw a punch, but he barely had to shift his body to dodge it. Then he grabbed the zombie's arm and slammed it into the ground as if it weighed nothing before tossing it back at the others. 2 more came charging, but Gian didn't give them any face, sweeping their legs with a swift kick. Then he quickly kicked them both in the rear with one move. Finding it all too easy, he couldn't help but mock himself. "I haven't even used my inner energy yet, and you guys are already about to keel over?" Seeing the goods he had spent so much effort raising being tossed aside without mercy, the stronghold leader was shocked and ordered more zombies to be sent out. Just standing there was too boring, so Gian couldn't resist mocking them. "Is this all you've got for serving the demon god?" I went on to insult the deity they worshipped, calling him a total quack who couldn't protect them from anything at all. That successfully enraged the whole lot of them. Everyone started waving their weapons, and the stronghold leader even brought out his massive, oversized axe, radiating pure killing intent. Seeing the leader trying to tear him apart, Gian didn't fear anyone. He drew his sword and challenged them. "Bring it on!" He talked a big game, but his brain was running a mile a minute. Currently, he was only at the superb master level. That stronghold leader had already reached the transformation realm. Charging in blindly would be suicide. This wasn't just a physical fight, it was a battle of wits. The leader, however, was in such a rush to finish Gian off in one strike that he swung his massive, oversized axe down with everything he had. If Gian had used his toothpick-sized sword to block it, it would have shattered instantly. Gian chose not to clash head-on, instead swerving and doing a mid-air flip to dodge the blow. Strength-wise, he obviously couldn't compare to that giant, but Gian had the advantage of speed and agility. He quickly tried to slash back, but as expected, the leader blocked it. So, Gian switched tactics, unleashing his lightning-fast sword energy, successfully cutting a line right across the guy's neck. Having achieved what he wanted, Gian landed and gave a mocking smirk. The stronghold leader was fuming, veins popping. To stay alive, Gian quickly used his signature move, the 36 world-shattering sword strikes, unleashing a super-fast attack. The guy got toasted by that move, but even though he landed the hit, Gian frowned in annoyance. It turned out that wasn't the target. It wasn't the stronghold leader, but a zombie sacrifice taking the hit instead. The real leader stood behind, completely unscathed, looking truly regretful. Regretful that he had underestimated the kid. Now, he would fight with his full power. A massive, overwhelming aura erupted from his body. It felt just like when he fought the Manhwa sect leader. His axe transformed into a gigantic, massive warhammer, smashing down toward Gian with such force that it carved a huge crater in the ground. But he hadn't even managed to touch a hair on Gian's head, leaving the guy completely baffled. Just then, massive boulders began rolling down from above, crushing the bandit group, a classic case of biting off more than you can chew. Once they realized they'd been trapped, the leader found himself pinned down by countless transparent arrows. So, before running off, Gian didn't forget to turn back and toss one last taunt to keep things lively. Naturally, the bandits were furious and wanted to chase him, but the leader stopped them, afraid there might be even more traps ahead. At this moment, the zombies were using their strength to push the boulders aside to save those trapped underneath. The goatee-bearded man was starting to get nervous, never knowing when the kid might attack again. They had no choice but to leave the area as quickly as possible. But the stronghold leader, having taken such a painful hit earlier, was seething with rage and refused to let this grudge go. While he was losing his mind, Gion was calmly observing everything, laughing at their misery. Everything was going according to plan, but the main issue now was the zombies' physical bodies. They were coated in a layer as hard as steel, making them difficult to deal with. After some thought, Gion came up with a strategy. Use sword energy thinner than usual. So, he showed the other two how it was done. Standing in front of a massive boulder, Gion drew his sword and slashed a few times with what was supposed to be powerful sword energy. But now, it was as thin as a thread, yet it sliced through that huge rock with ease. If the rock could be shattered like that, then skin and flesh like the zombies stood no chance. But there was one problem. Neither of the other two had ever practiced this technique before. They were still a bit wary, so Gion just scoffed. "You guys know this stuff, right? Why are you so worried about such a simple thing?" Meanwhile, the bandit group was busy repositioning their forces to fight back. Gion's approach was felt instantly. Seeing him flying through the trees, the goat-bearded man immediately ordered his zombies to form a solid defensive line. He naively thought blades couldn't pierce the zombies' steel-like bodies, but Gion wasn't just using a sword, he was using sword mastery. A single swing unleashed countless threads of sword energy. They swept right through the zombies. They were sliced to pieces. Despite losing ground, the goat-bearded man refused to give up, thinking their numbers were enough. But wave after wave, they were all wiped out by those sword threads. It wasn't just the front line. The reinforcements behind were also decimated by Seong and Jeon. He never expected to find himself in such a predicament. Cornered, the goat-bearded man told the camp leader to capture them quickly before Gion led them away again. Seeing this, the leader grabbed his axe and charged. Seeing the leader coming for him, Gion ordered a retreat. But just 3 steps away, he turned back to intercept him, using sword mastery. Once again, the leader had no choice but to use his axe to hack away at those sword threads. But once the dust settled, only the axe marks remained. Gion had long since vanished. Watching his prey almost within reach only to slip away again drove him into a rage. He stomped his axe into the ground and roared. Meanwhile, on the other side, Seong and Jeon had successfully escaped the goat-bearded man. The enemy had lost half their zombies and soldiers, but they weren't about to be toyed with again. The goat-bearded man flashed a sinister smile. He had an idea. Meanwhile, the Chungnam sect was resting, after Jeon carefully wiped her sword clean. She noticed a falling leaf and instinctively used the sword mastery she'd just learned, slicing the leaf into pieces. Suddenly, she noticed something. Jeon was washing up, splashing water around, his face flushed. Catching her staring at his body, he gave her a puzzled look and jokingly showed off his shredded shirt, which looked like a rag. Seeing her junior growing stronger by the day, holding his own against the camp leader, Jeon asked if she could become that strong if she trained like him. Would she be able to achieve that level of power? Jeon didn't answer directly. Instead, he spoke about cultivating the upper dantian. It was about his ability to fight strategically, not just speed and strength, but using his head. Jeon decided she wanted to try learning this technique. Seeing her finally open to martial arts outside the Chungnam sect, Gion was surprised but agreed to teach her himself. With that settled, they prepared to move out. Even the senior brother, Seong, had been ready for ages, just waiting for them to finish up so they could leave. They stood watching every move of the great mountain camp. Having caught up so quickly, Seong had a bad feeling. They had definitely set a trap. Even so, Jeon insisted on going down to scout alone. If anything happened, it was better for him to be caught than for them all to die together. Gion left them and bolted. Seeing him appear, the bandits set up a formation, but that was nothing to his sword mastery. One strike sent the whole group to the afterlife. He cleared them out in a flash and breathed a sigh of relief. But suddenly, the blood from the fallen started flowing everywhere, then rose into the air as if pulled by something. The space was filled with the stench of blood. The goat-bearded man chanted, turning the blood into energy for a ritual. Instantly, the red liquid surrounded Gion, forming a dome that trapped him inside. Hearing movement behind him, he knew without looking that the camp leader was in there too. The leader appeared, scowling, radiating pure killing intent. Jian could see it. The man was furious after being played so many times. Since Jian's strategy had wiped out half his men, the leader was livid. But he was the last person who had the right to be angry. After all, the carnage he had caused previously was 10 times worse. Jian's own rage ignited. With eyes full of murder, he pointed his sword at the man's face, demanding justice for the lives he had slaughtered. Both of them were now consumed by hatred, aiming for each other's throats. The leader couldn't wait and struck first. Jian knew the man before him was an expert capable of splitting a mountain. But with the fire of vengeance in his eyes, the leader wasn't on his level anymore. This time, Jian used his sword to block the overhead strike directly. The difference in power knocked him sliding back within the ritual circle. Jian couldn't run like before, but even cornered, he twisted his body to dodge the axe's energy. The leader didn't stop, swinging his weapon again. He brought it down in a clean arc. After dodging, Jian pushed off the ground, taking a risk to force the enemy to reveal his hidden 10%. The leader scoffed, claiming the power gap was too clear. There was no way Jian could beat him. He sneered and tossed his axe aside, surprising Jian. Suddenly, the man gathered his chi. From out of nowhere, 2 massive blades appeared. This was the final 10% he had been hiding all along. Jian couldn't help but shudder. The leader's face was covered in aggressive red veins, taunting him to dodge if he could, to live up to his expectations. Jian flicked his body, dodging both axe strikes. He countered with sword mastery, sharp threads of energy aiming for the leader. But to him, these were just child's play. But he didn't realize it was a diversion. While he blocked the attack, Jian was already beneath him. Without hesitation, he unleashed the 36 worldly sword forms. Piercing him, a flash of light exploded outward. Outside, the Chungnam sect was deeply worried. According to Seong, the black magic of the ritual was immense. They didn't know if he could break the encirclement from the inside alone. Hearing this, Gongsan was anxious. They decided that if they couldn't break the formation, they would just kill the one who created it. It was obvious the ritual was the goat-bearded man's work, so they all grabbed their swords and headed out, aiming to take that bastard's pathetic life. The bearded creep controlling the formation could feel the Taoists closing in. Right now, the Bloodlight Corps soldiers are just his mindless puppets. They aren't strong enough to hold back the numbers of the Chungnam sect. If the bearded creep runs for his life now, the formation will crumble. He has no choice but to stand his ground and grit his teeth to keep it going. I praise the bandit chief takes Jian down quickly. After Jian unleashed a lethal sword strike, they wait for the dust to settle. Jian's expression shifts to pure disbelief. The chief is still standing despite his face being a bloody mess, desperately trying to keep his defenses up. Naturally, the martial arts of the orthodox sects are more stable than the unorthodox ones. You could say the techniques of the Chungnam sect are simply unmatched. Even though the bandit chief is running low on sword ki, he still puts on a show, laughing like a maniac because he thinks Jian is out of energy too. Suddenly, dozens of axes of all sizes sprout from his body. Jian didn't expect him to still have this much fight left. An expert at the Hwagyong realm is no joke. Before he can even marvel at it, the chief launches a barrage of his weapons at him. Jian manages to block them with quick reflexes, but there are endless axes flying his way. Meanwhile, on John's side, things are intense. The Chungnam disciples are locked in a bloody struggle with the Bloodlight Corps. Seeing such heavy security, Seong is certain that the bearded creep is hiding here. Suddenly, 3 leader-class zombies appear behind him, trying to overwhelm him with sheer numbers. Seong quickly uses sword ki to take them out. Then he leads the charge. Inside a small tent, 2 zombie guards are standing watch. An informant rushes inside, panicked because the Taoists have reached their doorstep. He's shaking in his boots but tries to act cool, ordering his men to hold them back. Across the field, the bearded creep is racing against death. He struggles to maintain the formation while the chief is still tied up with Jian. No matter how powerful the chief's attacks are, Jian still has one trick up his sleeve. He uses threads of sword ki to form a solid shield. Seeing Jian still standing strong, the chief goes berserk and launches a flurry of axes once again. Jian continues to use his sword ki to block, and both attacks collide. The grueling fight turns into a test of endurance. The chief has burned through a lot of internal energy and taken a beating, causing him to cough up blood. However, Gion is also reaching his limit. He calls upon the core of the Chungnam Black Origin sect. Countless strands of sword ki surround the chief from the outside, but his axes still possess terrifying power. He manages to block all of Gion's swords. Gion's final move fails, making the chief laugh in triumph, but his joy doesn't last long. Karma comes back to bite him. As the axes dissipate, the chief starts coughing up blood uncontrollably. He's hit his limit and has absolutely no internal energy left. This is the end for him. Gion points his sword ki at him one last time, followed by 1,000 swords piercing his heart. The grueling battle finally ends in victory. John lets out a sigh of relief, though he has no idea how they'll make it out of here. The bearded creep is panicked as he feels the death of the chief. In his desperation, his dark arts manuals suddenly spill all over the ground. He grits his teeth, unable to think straight as Seo Ong's group begins to storm in. The zombies step over the corpses of the fallen Taoists. Facing an army of the undead, the Chungnam disciples don't back down. There are only 30 zombies left. These must be the last ones. But right now, only Seo Ong and John are able to use sword ki. So they have no choice but to fight head-on. They charge into the zombies like moths to a flame, taking down several in a row with their sword ki. Suddenly, a zombie from the back leaps at John, landing a blow to his chest that nearly kills him. Seo Ong standing nearby wants to help, but 3 zombies are already targeting him. His sword ki only manages to block 2 of them. The third one is tough, forcing the chief to clash with it directly. The disciples can only grit their teeth and watch. Gongsun knows he can't just rely on the 2 of them. Remembering his master's constant training, every time he got hit on the head, an idea strikes him. Gongsun isn't strong enough to kill a zombie, but he can slip past them. He takes a stance, then dashes through the middle of the chaos like lightning, rushing straight into the bearded guy's tent. In a surprise move, while the guy is still reeling that a kid made it through the zombies, Gongsun snatches his head. Meanwhile, Gion is going absolutely wild. Even though his energy is low, he keeps swinging his sword at the formation, determined to break this damn cage, when suddenly the formation just vanishes. Gion stands there blankly, not having a clue what just happened. But seeing Seo Ong and his group coming toward him looking beat up, he finally understands. They must have gone through hell to save him. They look like beggars now. The Chungnam sect has won. After taking down the bandit chief deep in the forest, the bearded creep, who everyone thought was a goner, is somehow still alive. I can't believe it. Since when did the Chungnam sect become this monstrously strong? This incident has turned the martial world upside down. The bandit chief who once took out the leader of the Hwasan sect has now fallen to young talents from the Chungnam sect. They've been given new nicknames. Seo Ong is the yin-yang heavenly sword, Gongsun is the dragon-tongued spear, and John is the flower of the Chungnam sect. Everyone is whispering that their sect has uncovered the secret to becoming the #1 master, but they don't bother explaining, letting the rumors stand. While they study the manuals Gion created, he is busy training the next generation. Hai demonstrates the Heaven Iron Divine skill, followed by the Yin-Yang Internal Poison Immunity skill and the Heavenly Sensory Kai technique, which makes their senses much sharper. All of this helps them control the flow of a battle. Still, the disciples seem a bit annoyed. They don't want to learn these minor things. Gion gives them a piece of his mind, tells them to shut up and train. The number of disciples joining the Chungnam sect continues to grow. Naturally, there were those overcome with greed, desperate to steal the sect's secrets. Meanwhile, the Martial Arts Alliance leader was deeply worried that the Chungnam sect had become a literal factory for producing elite masters. This meant they were becoming prime targets for the greedy, all eager to snatch those secret techniques. The head strategist, looking hesitant and concerned, still decided to propose a plan to raise an army. Since the Chungnam sect had close ties with the Mu Yung family, and they already had a cooperative relationship with that family, they could use the Mu Yung family to get their hands on the Chungnam sect's secrets. They hoped this would stop the chaos that was bound to break out. Although the alliance leader wasn't thrilled with this approach, he had no other choice, so he went along with it. He couldn't help but sigh, wondering why their righteous sect had become such a chaotic, disorganized mess. Meanwhile, at the Ta Huyet Lian, they were attempting to create a zombie army, but it was a complete failure. His Shich Huyet evil arts weren't making any progress either, yet his sect was supposed to be at the peak of glory. Fueled by jealousy and spite, the demon Sat Magio wanted to annihilate the Chungnam sect. Deep in a cave, a group of hooded figures were huddled together. Naturally, they weren't there for a group huddle. They were performing a ritual. As the man stabbed his own hand, dripping black blood into a large vat, the figures surrounding him poured their power into it. Once everything was mixed, a giant, grotesque butterfly was born. Its wings disintegrated, turning into countless smaller butterflies that flew out under the moonlight. And so, Samaneo's revenge had begun. Back at Chungnam, they were hosting a grand feast. Chang Seong, the host of the party, stood up to say a few words. But hearing himself being praised, Gion didn't feel proud. He just exhaled a long breath and forced a smile. Everyone else was busy eating and drinking, and they were all stunned by Gawa's massive appetite. Suddenly, the girl noticed him skipping his meal and leaving alone, so she followed him, wondering where he was going. At that moment, Gion was sitting under a tree, wallowing in despair. I didn't even need to close his eyes to see the piles of corpses and his own blood-stained sword. Suddenly, Gion heard her voice and snapped out of his trance in a panic. It turned out Gawa had noticed he wasn't himself and had followed him out of concern. He reassured his apprentice that he was fine, just unhappy with what he had done. Gion knew that whether he liked it or not, he had to force himself to do what had to be done. He had killed many people, his hands were stained with blood, but he felt no regret for his actions. Naturally, since they were villains, they deserved their fate, but Gion still struggled with the moral weight of having blood on his hands. But he couldn't explain these complex, chaotic feelings to a child like Gawa yet. So Gion just brushed it off. I went back to teaching her martial arts as usual, standing by to watch Gawa. Meanwhile, in Gunseong, the house was engulfed in flames, and a bandit lay dead. Someone came to report to the man standing there. Everything is ready. By now, they had rounded up all the evil practitioners and intended to hand them over to the Martial Arts Alliance. Naturally, his subordinate disagreed. But this is only the beginning. So, even if he couldn't stand it, he had to endure. This seemingly gentle-looking man was the sect leader of the High Osban Magic, a mature man with 5 incredibly strong disciples. Hun himself was no slouch, being one of the 8 masters known as the Panger. To successfully raid the large mountain stronghold, he had even hired people to train his soldiers. A man dedicated to justice and indifferent to fame, yet he was actually a spy planted by the demon cult, tasked with plunging the martial world into a bloodbath with a giant sword. Meanwhile, Gion was training diligently. His goal was clear: to reach the transformation realm like the stronghold leader and gain control over his own will. Moving energy through thought, coordinating hands, feet, and the dantian, it had to flow like a living organism. Reaching the super elite level meant controlling chi physically. It took time for it to travel to his hands and be projected, but he still couldn't control it properly. I was aiming for the next stage to use his dantian more flexibly, but overthinking was getting him nowhere. Gion continued to practice the technique he felt most confident in. First, obviously, the Chungnam boxing style, his specialty. Gion's hands were swift as a viper's strike. In a one-on-one fight, boxing was superior. It definitely gave him the advantage. Then, he fired a strike from his palm, and inner energy manifested, swirling around his arm. Gion grabbed it and stood in a horse stance, hands clasped, but just as he was about to unleash the blast, the energy vanished because the connection was broken. Gion wanted to try one more time. He moved his body fluidly and relaxed, then executed the second palm technique of the Chungnam sect. This time, something surged from his elbow. It was still faint, but Gion knew that with a little more effort, he would succeed. I was working so hard, but to passers-by, he looked like a lunatic playing by himself. Elsewhere, under the pouring rain, a group of people in red robes lay dead with their eyes wide open. Strangely, centipedes were crawling all over the face of the dead man. At the Sacheon Palace, they were discussing the death of Jang Seong. The leader of the HDL Lang was incredibly worried because the super elite masters had all died suddenly while raiding the large mountain stronghold. That man, Jang Seong, was an expert in poisons. So, dying from poison was impossible. There was definitely something fishy behind these mass deaths. They were terrified of being the next to go. They started making excuses to pause the raids on the mountain stronghold. At the Martial Arts Alliance, the head strategist sat in silence, wondering when everything had gone wrong. I wasn't skilled enough to decipher it all yet. Just then, the Alliance leader arrived, asking if a solution had been found for the evil shadows. Those who reached the transformation realm were unaffected, but everyone else would be consumed by it, so for now, the attack had to be postponed. The only temporary fix was to ask for help from the Mosan sect, because they were more skilled in this field than any other sect. Back at Chungnam, Elder Zhang was also worried, not knowing if their sect would safely make it through this catastrophe. Their sect has made careful preparations, so the shadow entities won't be able to do anything. However, all the low-level Taoists have already died because of it. Even a major sect is at risk of annihilation. There is no way they can send anyone to help Vomin Lam. They are barely holding it together themselves, and fortunately, the shadow entities cannot affect places protected by defensive formations. That is why the masters who were killed were only targeted outside, thus everyone is forbidden from leaving the sect. The priority right now is to investigate that dark art. Afterward, we must train the disciples well. Just then, after leaving the meeting, Gaon dropped a bombshell on his master. He wants to learn magic, and he is asking Master Che Ongsu to teach him. And so, after getting his master's approval, he left, feeling quite happy. When Gaon arrived at his uncle's hall and met his disciples, they gave him a hard time about wanting to study there, only relenting when Gaon used the excuse that he wanted to continue, gaining knowledge to escape his own ignorance. The two of them hesitated for a moment before agreeing to go in and report it, though the guy couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. A martial arts prodigy now wants to learn magic? Is he trying to take over the world or something? Inside the room, incense smoke filled the air, and the man sitting there with his eyes closed, reading a book, was Che, Master Ongsu. When he closed the book and opened his eyes, he was confused as to why Gaon would want to learn magic. Naturally, apart from the reason that it might help him complete his martial arts, there was no other motive. He was looking for the shortest path to reach the transformation realm so he could help others, to reach the same level he had. Gaon's textbook, Miss Universe-style answer left him deep in thought for a while. Eventually, after reflecting on it, Master Che Ongsu agreed to teach him, starting tomorrow. After Gaon left, he sighed, wishing that if old Sa Bitch had brought Gaon here back then, perhaps by now, he would have had a genius disciple. The next day, while he was busy studying, the two junior sect disciples came rushing over, since they had been sending letters to Gaon for a whole week. But because he hadn't replied, the two of them had to make the long journey here themselves. But since he was still acting like a good student, he kicked them both out immediately. He was then met with the roar of that lioness of Haddo right to his face. Ioni then mentioned that Trungnam possesses a secret technique, so they are being targeted by the entire world. Gaon didn't hesitate to speak his mind, asking if their true purpose was to represent Modong and take that secret technique for themselves. She didn't even bother denying it and admitted it outright, leaving Ioni, who didn't know what was going on, completely bewildered. Oh, good grief. Actually, Modong had sent her sister here because of the secret technique, but the girl still didn't want to follow orders. Jian thought for a moment and then made his final statement, asking the two of them to go back and announce that Trungnam and Modong will forever be partners, so when the time is right, his sect will automatically share the secret manuals with them. Of course, Gian was just speaking on his own behalf, and he didn't know if the elders would agree or not. The real goal behind this was that Trungnam would help Modong become stronger and they would remain on the same side, then use the secret technique to link up with other sects, to form a solid alliance so that the rest of the martial arts world cannot interfere. After the discussion ended, he brushed his hands off and chased the two of them away. He had to get back to his studies, but they started acting all coy and making excuses, yet Gian was only focused on the transformation realm, so he had to set them straight. What on earth are you two thinking about all day? We haven't even finished dealing with the main problem yet. This successfully hurt Ioni's pride, and she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Ioni quickly paid her respects and chased after her younger sister. As soon as they stepped outside, they started howling like madwomen, which made Gian inside feel like his heart was about to jump out. These people, did they forget to take their meds before stepping out the door, or what? The episode ends here, everyone. I really hope you guys will support with a like and share so I have the motivation to make more exciting episodes.